Hi, Councillor Swanson. It's Tina Penny.
Hi, Tina. How are you?
Doing good. I'm going to be joining you tonight.
Oh, that's good for us.
Yeah, good for
I
me
hope
too.
it's good for you.
Well, you keep us well employed. What can I say? Okay. We can hear you and we can see you. All good. Thank you.
Okay.
Hi, clerks. It's the mayor here. I just gonna have my video off for a few minutes, but I'm here.
Thank you, Mayor Stewart. It's Tina Penny with you tonight.
Great.
You check what she sent. Councillor Boyle, can we do his audio?
We sure can. How are you, Tina?
I can hear you, but you're coming in very, very faintly.
everyone, and welcome to the Reconvene Standing Committee on Policy and Strategic Priorities of July 8th, 2021. This committee meeting is being convened by electronic means as authorized under Part 14 of the Procedure Bylaw, the City of Vancouver Electronic Meetings Regulation, and the order of the Minister of Public Safety and Solicitor General of the Province of British Columbia, Emergency Program Act, updated Ministerial Order number M192. Committee members are participating by phone, and as chair of this meeting, I'm also participating by phone. For the purposes of confirming quorum, Council, please ensure your video is turned on and that you message the clerk if you need to leave the meeting. Note, if my connection is lost during any portion of this meeting, we will recess the meeting until my connection is restored. If committee members lose connection during the voting process, we will have staff on hand to facilitate getting you back online quickly while we suspend the voting process, and that contact information has been circulated to you. We acknowledge that we are on the unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. Thank them for having cared for this land and look forward to working with them in partnership as we continue to build this great city together. I also want to take a moment to recognize the immense contributions of the City of Vancouver staff who work so hard every day to help make our city an incredible place to live, work, and play. Deputy City Clerk, may we have the roll call, please?
Mayor Stewart, Mayor Stewart,
Oh, here.
thank you. Councillor Carr is chair. Councillor DiGenova,
Present.
Councillor Fry,
Present.
Councillor Swanson,
Here.
Councillor Hardwick,
Present.
Councillor Weeb,
Present.
Councillor Boyle,
Present.
Councillor Dominato,
Present.
Councillor Bligh,
Present.
and Councillor Kirby Young. Oh, Councillor Kirby Young has a leave of absence for civic business from 6 until 7:30. The meeting has quorum, Chair Carr.
Great, thank you. Council, I'd like to go over the plan for the evening. Following the updated guidance issued on June 17th, 2021, the in-person participation for local government meetings and public hearings is permitted with restrictions of 50 persons or less under the Provincial Health Officer, PHO, Order on Gatherings and Events. Therefore, public may participate by speaking in person, by phone, or by submitting written comments to Mayor and Council. Virtual participation is highly encouraged as there are capacity limits within City Hall. Speakers should follow along on Twitter at Van City Clerk for updates on the progress of the meeting so you don't miss your turn to speak. Any comments on agenda items can be sent to Council using the web form on the city's website. The link to that form will be tweeted out on @Van City Clerk. I also want to note the City of Vancouver's long-standing commitment to equity, diversity, and inclusion, including utmost respect for all genders. I remind Council that when addressing speakers and staff, we will avoid using gendered honorifics and will instead refer to the person by first and last name or role or title. So we have 3 items remaining on Council's agenda. Council, continue debate and decision on item 2 and 2 member motions referred from the July 6th Council meeting. If an additional day is required, the meeting will reconvene July 14th at 3 p.m. Finally, I would like to remind Council members that if amendments are brought forward, they must be submitted to the City Clerk in final written form before the Council member introduces them. Please ensure the City Clerk has received your amendment, and any amendment submitted yesterday will need to be resubmitted today. So we are tonight continuing with item 2, methodology for cooperative housing lease renewals. Yesterday, we asked a round of questions to staff, heard from 50 speakers, and began a second round of questions to staff. Tonight, we will begin with staff's summary of answers to questions emailed in by committee members. Following those responses, we will continue with our second round of questions to staff. Councillors Dominato and Swanson, you have used your 5 minutes for this round. Councillor Fry, you have used 4 minutes. To provide this summary, we have Sandra Singh, General Manager of Arts, Culture, and Community Services on the line. So, Sandra?
Point of privilege?
Yes,
Councillor DiGenova, I'm on the queue.
DiGenova, yes.
Thanks, Chair Carr. Unfortunately, I was on a scheduled and approved leave of absence yesterday from the dinner break onwards, and I was not able to listen to all of the proceedings. So I will be leaving the meeting and be asked to be marked absent as I couldn't review all of the proceedings. I just wanted to note that for you, but I will return for the other items after this item is completed.
Okay, thank you for that information. And Clerk, if you can duly note the absence of Councillor DiGenova.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Carr. Just in order for it to be genuine, it would we would have to, at the time of the vote, remove Councillor DiGenova from the meeting. If you could give us time to do that, please.
Okay, just when we get to that point, if I don't remember at that time, remind me to just allow that time so that you can remove her from the meeting. And then Councillor DiGenova, you can rejoin after the vote. And Clerk, will you inform Councillor DiGenova of when that's done so that she can rejoin for the last two items? Clerk?
Yes, that's correct.
Great, thank you. Good. So Sandra Singh, we are ready to receive your presentation. Thank you.
Chair Carr,
thank you, Count.
Oh, pardon me, Mr. Sorry, Paul Mokri, go ahead.
Problem. Yeah, thanks. So we do have a lot of answers to provide, and want to first of all just acknowledge the work that the team's done over the last 24 hours to address all of the questions that Council has provided. And Sandra will walk through those. I would ask just to, if you can indulge me, just to provide some additional opening kind of remarks here as context as well, just in particular for members of the public, and reflecting on the discussion that happened last night and some of the comments that Council heard. I don't know that it's always clear to members of the public what the rationale for the recommendations from staff are. And it's possible that there may be some misunderstanding about how staff do our work and formulate these recommendations. So I'm just going to address that very quickly, if I may. So we've heard as staff very clearly from this council regarding the impact of the housing crisis and the prioritization of housing affordability as a key policy objective for this council. As you know, Council, the city has very limited tools to offset market forces. The use of city-owned land as a platform to deliver lower cost housing is one of those primary tools. The renewal of co-op leases is, as you know, is an extremely complex challenge. It's one that there's been many years of work put into, a huge amount of effort by our staff team, as well as by representatives CHFBC and co-op representatives. So in approaching this issue, staff have been approaching it and working with the policy direction that we have from staff, and that we have been given from council. And that really is, in general terms, to maximize affordability. And in doing this work, we're also mindful that we operate within a framework of other related policies and programs. So we generally aim to provide council with recommendations or options that are aligned with and consistent with that rubric of existing policies. So in this instance, that policy framework includes the approach that the city takes to creating affordability and managing access to affordable housing in other housing types. And that's really what the staff team have done here. So these recommendations that are reflected in the staff report are intended to leverage the city's land assets to create the most possible affordability for people who need it most. Of course, that's a policy recommendation that's designed at a macro level. And as you've heard, all co-ops are different. And then within co-ops, the circumstances of each individual members are unique to them. And we certainly recognize that. That's an inherent challenge in most public policy work. It's really not feasible generally to design policy approaches for individual circumstances. And as a result, you do end up with varying impacts at individual levels. For that reason, staff have incorporated flexibility into the recommendations and scope to work with individual co-ops to reflect their respective circumstances, while again attempting to maintain consistency with the city's overall objectives and approach to delivering affordable housing. So I think it's important to acknowledge that as civil servants, we work as staff within the parameters of the direction that we receive from elected officials. And the recommendations in the report really do reflect the best efforts of our staff team to do that. But to be clear, we also acknowledge that council, it's you that are ultimately accountable for the outcomes of policy decisions, and that the residents of Vancouver have elected you to weigh the trade-offs. At their essence, those decisions are value decisions. They're not technical decisions, and your decision making is not subject to the same constraints that we work within. But I think, like I say, it's important to acknowledge that staff, again, are working with a framework of policy direction and are doing our best to interpret that. And that's really what lies behind the recommendations that you've received. So thanks. With that, appreciate the opportunity to kind of provide that opening piece. And with that, I'll turn it over to Sandra to walk through the various questions and answers that the staff team has prepared.
Great.
Thanks.
Yep. Thanks, Paul.
Okay. Thank you. So Sandra Singh, General Manager, Arts, Culture, and Community Services. So I have a list of questions and responses here with me. Some we were able to prepare in advance, and you do have, but we just sent them, so I'll respond to them now. And we also have, if council is interested as well, a list of questions that arose or points of confusion that arose during the speakers yesterday that we are happy to speak to as well. And there were about 13 questions that we tracked through the speakers that are not covered in the questions that council asked. So after I go through council questions, if you'd like to hear some of the responses to those, I'm happy to read those out as well. So the first question from council was, could we have some examples with samples like sample co-ops like CHS has in its paper only with the city's proposal? So we'll know how the city proposal works out in practical and concrete terms, and if the co-ops can afford it. So using a sample co-op with 42 units and the unit mix below, which was 6 studios, 1 bedroom, 7 one-bedrooms, 23 two-bedrooms, and 6 three-bedrooms, we did model that. And just to flag for council is through this, we did model using co-op data as well as census data. But based on that model, the land rent in the first year would be $343 per unit per month, assuming that co-op had 15% RGI, could be higher, and that would then change things. The land rent would escalate to $477 per unit per month by 2028 after the 7-year period. So that's about $150 per unit per month. And that assumes a 2% inflationary increase. For this sample co-op with 42 units, assuming the 15 RGI units and that inflation provision, the average housing charge would change for non-RGI units in the following ways. So the increase from the current base unit of $1,244 per month in year 1 would move to $1,540 per month in year 7 after the transition period. And so in the responses we provided to you, there's some more unit examples that you can look at, but that summarizes it for now. The second question was, has the city factored in PTT if co-ops have to pay it, and would the land rent go down if they did? So the response to that is that the PTT would be a cost paid for by co-ops if the province doesn't support a waiver or a grant offset, further to recommendation E in the report. The city did propose initially leases of up to 30 years, which would not trigger PTT. However, co-ops have a very strong preference for longer leases, which would attract this tax. So it's not something that we factored in. If a co-op wishes to not pay PTT, then certainly we would be very open to a lease term that does not trigger the tax. The third question is, staff say that land rent isn't based on market because it's based on median income. How is the median income calculated, and isn't the subsidy based on market land values? So we use 25% of 2015 median Vancouver incomes as per census data, and we would amend this benchmark once more recent census data becomes available. And the census data is available on household size, and then it needs to be linked to unit sizes by staff. So for example, a 2-person household could be linked in a 1-bedroom unit, for example. Staff have used an approach which takes the midpoint of 2 household sizes to further reduce the benchmark in the co-op's favor, and there's a chart in your document that illustrates that. And so basically, the subsidy provided to the co-op is the discount from the market lease, but the actual lease rate is set disconnected from market based on median incomes or the 15% discount, whichever is less. So the lease rate is discounted from market, but the grant amount is tied to it. Will or could a co-op member who is receiving a subsidy have to pay more rent with the new formula? This is what some members are hearing, and I need to know if it's true. The city will significantly discount the land rent associated with any RGI unit and will enable cross-subsidy through below-market land rent for non-RGI members. So accordingly, the co-op can ensure that no RGI household pays in excess of 30% of income in housing charges, and they can choose to further deepen the affordability for that unit if they choose to within the dynamics of their income mix. So no RGI household should be paying more under this formula. That's the intent. Can you provide a comparison of the city's recommendations and CHFBC's preferred proposal? Are there any points that are the same, and what is different? So the primary difference between the two proposals is the pricing structure, as you heard from speakers yesterday. CHFBC's preferred approach would result in benchmark housing charges that are below 100% of HILS for all of the members, representing a significant additional grant to households that earn above HILS. The staff model supports deeply discounted rent or land rent for RGI households, and then land rent benchmarks, which are below market or at the low end of market for non-RGI households. And that would enable moderate and higher income members to pay less than their peers in non-co-op settings, as well as to cross-subsidize internally as necessary. And lowering the benchmark further to median renter incomes or median co-op incomes, as suggested, would result in land rent for non-RGI units, which is lower than that of households eligible for RGI units. So what happens is you start to have some overlap in those land rents. Question 6, please explain why support for non-RGI households constitutes a grant and how the Vancouver Charter plays into this. So the city is making a grant whenever it enters into leases for below market value. And the city makes such grants pursuant to Section 206(1) of the Vancouver Charter. The amount of the grant in the methodology is the different, and in fact, in any of our grants, whether it's a cultural below market cultural lease or a below market social lease or childcare lease, the amount of the grant is the difference between the fair market value of the use of the land and the amount paid by the organization, and in this case, the co-op. So grants can be made to organizations deemed by council to be contributing to the welfare of the city. In this case, the staff are recommending that co-ops may be deemed at council's discretion at the time of granting a lease renewal to be an organization that is contributing to the welfare of the city based on the unique features of the co-ops and the many benefits of co-ops that staff outlined in the staff report. And as the city is proposing a discounted land rent for non-RGI units, this would be less than the fair market value of the use of the land. So basically in the proposed methodology, every household is being discounted from market, or every unit, sorry. The 7th question is, would co-ops have resources to reallocate for cross-subsidies if the non-RGI units get the deeper subsidies by switching to a median renter household income baseline rather than other over household income, Vancouver median income, I guess. Co-ops will have the resources to cross-subsidize without deeper subsidies for non-RGI households. This is because the staff model bases land rents on the lower of 25% of median Vancouver incomes or discounted CMHC neighborhood rents. Therefore, housing charges for non-RGI members will continue to be well below market. Providing deeper city subsidies to non-RGI households may enable more cross-subsidy, but there is no guarantee the subsidy would be directed to RGI members, and the outcome may be further reductions of housing charges for non-RGI members. It really will be at the discretion of the co-ops because we're not we're not managing at that level. We're just setting the land rent, which is just one expense of the break-even housing chart model, and the co-op, the autonomy is with the co-op. If council wishes to provide more flexibility to low and moderate income members, the recommendation would be to consider extending the transition period for these households, but not the remainder of members earning above HILS. So council could stratify the transition grant if you so wished. Question 8, it was referring to slide 27 in the presentation, indicated that 48% of co-op members are below HILS. This is way better than we require with our definition of social housing, which is 30%. Can we compare what the city is subsidizing to get 30% at HILS in social housing versus what we pay to keep 48% in co-ops? So we do require additional time to calculate that. That's quite a complex calculation. We'd need to go back and look at historical nonprofit leases, the values they paid and the affordability requirements and what they're currently delivering. But similar to co-ops, some nonprofits could be delivering more than what they were contractually required. So as we noted, co-ops were actually delivering in 2015 more than what their CMHC minimum was, which was 15%. So, and just to flag that our older lease agreements may not have the reporting requirements, and we may not have actual affordability levels on record. The reference to 48% RGI in that slide was an approximation for modeling purposes. We heard from CHFBC as well as co-ops yesterday that the portion of co-op members in RGI units is generally in the 15 to 30% range, but we modeled based on 48% in order to be conservative and to assume higher, lower income units. As per the staff proposal, if a co-op seeks to increase the number of RGI units, for example, to 48% of the overall household mix, there would be a mechanism for the city to discount the land rent further so that the co-op can offer those discounted housing charges. The ninth question was around the staff providing an example of a co-op and how it would fare over a decade. So staff have provided analysis, and that should be in your inbox. There was the next question, question 10, was I'm not clear why staff would use 30% in the RGI units and 25% in the non-RGI units in our work. And so staff proposed two benchmarks: 30% of the average income of RGI units. 70% of HILS was the target used in discussions with CHFBC, but we would absolutely reduce that if the actual average incomes of RGI units in a co-op are lower. So we said in the model 30%, we use 70% as the example, so 30% of 70% of HILS as the example, but if a co-op's RGI unit average incomes are actually around 50% of HILS, then we would use 30% of 50% of HILS. The 25% of median Vancouver incomes was used as the benchmark for non-RGI units. Staff recommended using 25% instead of 30% to provide additional subsidy to non-RGI members, which could enable cross-subsidization if necessary, and also reflects the city's support and valuing of these existing mixed income communities. The result is reference incomes that are slightly above HILS for family units, which make up the majority of the co-op portfolio. And by design, these land rents would be affordable to households earning median Vancouver incomes and would be nearly identical to benchmarks based on 30% of median Vancouver rental incomes. Households earning above median incomes would continue to pay housing charges that are below 30% of their income, and the difference between these housing charges and comparable market rates would create room for cross-subsidies at the discretion of a co-op. The next question 11, if all co-ops signed onto the city's recommendations, what would be the yearly increase in overall financial returns to VAHA? So any land rent proceeds would be incremental, and information can be included, will be included for council as leases come forward. There are certain aspects of the methodology that are difficult to approximate and will affect the return. So for example, how many and what portion of the leases are prepaid versus scheduled annual payments. So council may recall that in discussions with CHFBC, we agreed that there would be opportunity for the co-op to have some portion of the lease rate prepaid and then annual scheduled payments after that. And so, and as also the number of co-ops renewing it at any time would be based on the end of their leases. What percentage of the co-ops will be eligible for the 40-20 year lease framework, and what is the lease structure for co-ops that aren't eligible? So right now, the co-ops that in this model, the co-ops that are eligible for the 40-20 year lease framework are co-ops that are not near-term redevelopment candidates, so we're not entering into a redevelopment agreement with them, and they're not part of a large site redevelopment. If the co-op is part of a large site redevelopment, then they're eligible for renewal, but they're not in their term would be aligned with the phase of that redevelopment plan. Because no large site redevelops all at once. They happen over a period of phases. And so all of the other terms would apply. It's just that the length of the lease would be tied to the redevelopment. So for sites that are being pursued for redevelopment, the co-op will be offered a new lease depending on the form of the asset or space being leased to the co-op, for example, land or an airspace parcel or a sublease of a larger building. And if the current lease with these co-ops expires before redevelopment of the existing site, the co-op will be eligible for an extension or short-term lease until the site is ready for redevelopment. So there is that provision to ensure security of housing during redevelopment as well. And at this point, the way it would work is that we would be looking at co-ops on a case-by-case basis and assessing the characteristics as to whether or not they might be a redevelopment candidate. And Ryan Bigelow can speak to that a bit later if council would like more information. The 13th question is, do we have assurances from the banking community that this process allows for co-ops to get bank financing even with the redevelopment clause? So staff engaged banks, credit unions, senior government lending bodies, and CHFBC's preferred lending partner, Vancity. Then the staff team and legal counsel worked with CHFBC's legal counsel to agree on a payment structure as laid out in the council report, Appendix A, under section Payment Structure and Mortgage of Leasehold Interest, which includes entering into a tripartite agreement between a co-op, the city, and the lender. So we are confident we have that covered. Question 14, how much does increasing the RGI units from 15% to 30% lower the housing charges for co-ops? So the pricing methodology in the staff proposal would set a total land rent for each individual co-op. If the proportion of RGI households were to increase, the land rent would decrease in correspondence. That is, the land rent associated with RGI units would be lower. As co-op housing charges are based on their expenses, also factored in are OPEX and CAPEX. 15, what is the affordable housing community amenity valued at if all co-ops sign on to that recommended proposal? We couldn't understand this question, so perhaps Councillor who asked it could clarify. This is a lease renewal of an existing co-op on existing sites, and so there is no development as part of this lease renewal. Question 16, what is the projected number of co-op spaces that would be created under the co-op development strategy? So staff are assuming this question is intended to determine how many units of housing could be created from redevelopment sites currently leased to co-ops. So currently staff are focusing on sites with leases expiring before 2027. Preliminary estimates indicate redevelopment of sites which the city would like to explore could yield more than 500 additional units. And this is still subject to significant fluctuation until further review is completed. And of course, there would be no redevelopment without discussion and partnerships with co-ops. The next question is, so I'm trying to see if I can truncate the question, it's quite long. It's related to autonomy of the co-op. So the response is that operating expenses already support any temporary changes for co-op members and leaves the autonomy to the co-op on how to allocate for temporary, this was around hardship assistance. So if a co-op member experiences temporary hardship, so the operating expenses already support any temporary changes for co-op members and leaves the autonomy to the co-op on how to allocate for temporary hardship assistance. If it's specified as a grant from the city, then we would have to monitor this and the funds going out for that purpose. So strongly recommended that this remains in the management of the co-op as part of their operating expenses. The 18th question is, what would a hardship assistance fund look like, and is it feasible? So co-ops have autonomy to manage temporary changes to their members internally. The 25% of Vancouver median income and operating expenses should allow co-ops to manage temporary hardship allowance without any interference from the city. There are some other questions that came in, that came in later in the afternoon. I have 3 answers here for them, and then I'll turn it over to Ryan Bigelow for the remainder. So the first is, if a co-op is in redevelopment site, a large redevelopment site, will the lease plan proposed by staff apply to them, or will prevailing policies apply? And if so, what are the prevailing policies? So lease arrangements will depend on the development plan of the large site areas. Co-ops on city leased land within the area will have a renewal and redevelopment schedule determined by when the city's large site redevelopment plan intends to redevelop those city-owned sites. Redevelopment of large site areas often is done in phases and have many interconnected parts, so require a bit more precision with respect to timing, hence the more variable term noted in the framework. The new lease terms with regard to affordability and replacement of units will align with the principles laid out in Appendix B of the reports that we worked on very closely and received consensus on with CHFBC. Given these redevelopments and associated new leases, are at some point in the future, the terms of that new lease will align with any changes to city policy on co-op leases that might happen, and this could be 20, 30 years down the road. If there are no changes, the principles in Appendix B would apply. The next question is, what % of co-ops on city land would the lease payment provisions in the staff proposal apply to, given that some co-ops are on redevelopment sites? So the lease payment provisions would apply to all co-ops that are renewing their leases. For the lands planned for redevelopment, the length of the renewal lease may be shorter until the redevelopment starts, or we just enter into a new lease for a new space without a renewal. Either way, the co-op has an agreement for housing with the city. Do we know which co-ops the city plans to redevelop in the next 10 years or so, and do they know, and is there funding for this? So staff are prioritizing the evaluation of sites leased to co-ops with leases expiring in the next 5 years. We have identified a handful of sites that make for really potentially great redevelopment opportunities, but they're still in the preliminary phases. Following the approval of this framework, we will notify those co-ops on leased land that we would like to explore redevelopment with them. And of course, we're always open to proposals from co-ops that might be interested in redevelopment and them bringing themselves forward. After being notified, we would work with the co-op to define a redevelopment plan and options to lease a new space, either on or off site. There are several other questions that came in too late in the day for us to draft responses, so I'll read out the question. Actually, I'll ask, all of these are redevelopment questions, so Ryan, I'll ask you to start, and I'll read out the first question. Are co-ops that are identified in phased large site redevelopment areas eligible to sign 40, 20-year leases with the finalized price model? So Ryan, if you could take it from here, that would be great.
Yeah, hi, this is Ryan Bigelow for the Vancouver Affordable Housing Agency. If it is a large site area that is being actively planned for redevelopment, then no. The only area actively being planned that we would consider a large site redevelopment area is in the Falls Creek South neighborhood. The other sites that may fall in this category in the future, if they wish to renew now, would be eligible for the 40-20 lease renewal.
Okay, thank you, Ryan. Yes, please. Yeah, sorry, please go on. Yes, thanks.
Yeah, part A to that question. If not, what lease term would be offered to the lease co-ops that would not impact their ability to secure financing for repairs / remediation? Our answer to that is that the need for financing repairs varies by co-op, and the extent of those repairs may change if the timing of redevelopment is in the near term. So this requires discussion with the specific co-op, but generally the lease term would align with the phase of redevelopment, but the pricing of that shorter term lease would align with the pricing model in this framework. some scenarios are included in Appendix A that describe this phasing and lease term. The next question there was, what areas of the city have been identified for phased large site redevelopment, and how many co-ops are potentially affected? The only area actively being planned that we would consider a large, as I mentioned earlier, a large site area is in the Falls Creek neighborhood. But future areas may include areas such as Champlain Heights. The next question is, how many co-ops have been identified for near-term redevelopment? This might be a repeat from a previous question here, but sites within staff are prioritizing the evaluation of sites leased to co-ops for leases expiring within the next 5 years. We've identified a handful of sites that make for potentially great redevelopments, but are still in the preliminary stages. So following approval of this framework, we will notify the co-ops on leased land we would like to explore redevelopment with. After being notified, we'll work with the co-op to define a redevelopment plan and options to lease new space either on or off the site. And of course, yeah, we are very, very open to proposals from co-ops. And the last question here was for transparency, can staff provide a list of all co-ops that have been identified for near-term redevelopment or within a phased large site redevelopment area? Yes, but we would like to notify those co-ops directly after approval of this framework before, say, disclosing that publicly. That's it for me, Sandra.
Great, thanks so much, Ryan. So, Chair, that concludes the list of council questions that we've received. So I'll turn it over to you. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And just can I thank you on behalf of all the council for the, I know, many, many hours of you and your staff in terms of receiving and answering those questions for us. This is a big issue and we all really appreciate it. So Councillor DeGenova is not here. So Councillor Boyle, questions. We are now, Councillor, just to remind you, in the phase of also continuing with questions. So go ahead, Councillor Boyle, up to 5 minutes.
Thanks, and I'll just echo the huge amount of work staff have been doing getting all of these answers. So actually most of my questions were asked. I appreciate that. I'm just wondering if staff can give us a sense of what happens next, noting this is a methodology, so council will hopefully we pass something tonight, and then what will that look like for co-op members? When will they sort of see or hear next about this?
Okay, thank you. Grayson, would you like to speak to that?
Sure. Thank you, Sandra. So the first thing we will do is we will start working with the co-ops that are soonest in expiry. There is one, Marina, and then there's another one coming up in, and Eight Oaks will be the first ones, just to ensure that they are in good standing and feel the security of tenure. We will apply this and we will bring it back to council for approval of the individual leases. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. And actually, I think that's my only question for now, so I'll just wait and hold. Thanks.
Great. So Councillor Dominata, you have used your 5 minutes. So yes, for this round, this is the second round. So
can I move us to the third round of questions in that event?
Yeah, what we have to do is suspend the rules for a third round. So it's going to take a 2/3 vote. But you can absolutely move to suspend the rules for a third round.
So moved.
Okay. Sorry, I'm just checking with the clerk, and I'm just making sure. Great. So I'm just going to try a verbal vote on this. All those in favor for a third round, please say aye.
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 Any opposed, nay? Okay, you've got well more than 2/3 consensus. Go ahead, Councillor Dominato. I'll reset your timer and then start you.
Thanks, Chair. And I just want to follow up on a question I asked last night, because I went through the memo that was sent to me, and maybe it was the framing of my question, but I'm now looking at page 21 of the staff report. And what I was trying to get at is there was obviously amendments being prepared to come forward proposing the median renter household as well as extending, transitioning, making a longer transition. And on page 21, when staff compared the city's methodology versus CHFBC's, they were able to quantify it in an aggregate of the city's methodology was a 15.5 million per year subsidy. CHFBC's was 27.7 million per year. And that was the number I was trying to get at last night. And if I missed it, can someone just point me to the right memo and I've seen the other tables that are by co-op, but I was looking in aggregate what that foregone lease revenue is and the implications in terms of delivering affordable or enabling affordable housing in other parts of the city and for other residents.
Yes, Council, I can pull up that information. It's in an email that was sent to Council. So the so is it the 25% of median Vancouver renter incomes comparison that you're looking for?
I'm looking to understand if Council adopts the proposed amendments that are coming forward.
Sure.
What is the aggregate
sure.
difference in subsidy and foregone lease revenue?
Sure. Okay. So for the CHFBC, so for the staff proposal in the report, it is the overall subsidy is $15.5 million per year projected. And again, this is estimates based on every single co-op renewing at once, which wouldn't happen. And we had to use generalized. We used the 48% of households below Hill. So there had to be, in order to do the comparison, there had to be some normalization. So the staff is $15.5 million per year. CHFBC's proposal in Appendix D is estimated at $27.7 million per year. CHFBC proposed yesterday as an alternative for Council the use of median Vancouver renter incomes. That would be $22 million a year. So that is the range of the total subsidy.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And I apologize.
Okay.
There's been a lot of paper.
Yeah.
I want to circle back to a point that was raised in the original slides around in some instances, and I don't think it's across the board, some co-ops hadn't really planned for the future in terms of both the renewal, but also in terms of capital maintenance. In going forward and establishing this framework, do we establish those expectations as part of the framework around that planning for the future piece and the maintenance and the capital investments?
Maybe I could clarify a couple of things. That co-ops do have building condition assessments that lay out their capital works that they need to do. We do know from our conversations that there are co-ops that have deferred maintenance, and we've seen this, and there are co-ops that have scheduled maintenance, and so there's a real mix. And so what is uniformly true is that all of these buildings are aging, and that there will need to be significant capital maintenance moving forward. And there will be a mix based on different co-ops of some deferred and some future planned. And so in terms of the moving forward, I'll ask Grayson to speak to the lease requirements around capital works in lease renewals.
So a couple things. This is represented in the model that we've put forward, not in the model itself, but it is one of the requirements and we've indicated to co-ops that they should be preparing for the future, especially the co-ops that are not expiring anytime soon because they have time on their hands. And it will be a requirement that, maybe not a requirement, a strong suggestion that co-ops prepare for lease expiry for the next round when it comes down to either extension or if it's in case of redevelopment.
Okay. I want to get in one more question with respect to, there was reference in one of the memos that where there was potential risk, depending on certain amendments, that non-RGI residence units could get a deeper subsidy than the RGI units or households. Is that a risk with any of the amendments that are not yet tabled?
So, Councillor, in the modeling of using the financial modeling of swapping out the 25% Vancouver median renter income into the financial model does result in the co-ops that we looked at in unit costs that are lower than RGI, lower than the hills that we're using. So yes, there is that overlap when if median Vancouver renter incomes were swapped out, and we sent you some information on that earlier this afternoon, just before.
Okay, so that is a likelihood, is that you would have deeper subsidies for those who are not RGI, the non-RGI households.
Yeah, so I can give you an example. If you give me one moment here.
We are well over time. I'm hoping
sure.
that maybe the next questioner can just. Anyway, we are over time. Sorry.
Thanks, Chair.
I'm sorry, Councillor Kirby Young. Up to 5 minutes for questions.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I just want to ask a bit of a question around. It's a little bit more of a qualitative question, I think, than some of the metrics, and it's around sort of this concept of redevelopment, the terminology of candidate for redevelopment. And I wonder if you could add some color to that, if it's in terms of densification of the site, and also with respect to if a site is a candidate for redevelopment, that may not necessarily be envisioned to be a co-op. It could be a different housing type, or do you see mixed housing types within one building, and then those individuals that are given security of tenure through a lease, potentially for an alternate site, would go somewhere else? It doesn't necessarily mean a co-op's going to pop up where it was previously, does it? Or could we see co-op mix, for example, with rental or with other housing types? I guess I'm asking the question in the spirit of trying to get a bit of a sense of what some of the questions we've gotten around the vision for the community and what it actually looks and feels like for people.
Sure, I'll ask Ryan Bigelow to answer that.
Hi, this is Ryan Bigelow. I would say it is very site specific, and we would want to have that discussion with the potential co-op that's currently leasing that site. And some of these sites may not just be housing, right? There could be other civic uses introduced to the site, and so that visioning process still needs to really fully take place, and I think the co-op is part of that. And so it will be site specific, and we'd have to look at the different needs in that neighborhood, the uses that make sense, and there may be different tenure types that would make sense. Potentially, the co-op may not want to take on more units, for example, and would prefer to retain its current size. And so, within a larger redevelopment, we would think about other uses and other models being used to use that space.
So when you the terminology is, which is very specific, that was utilized as candidate for redevelopment, what constitutes a candidate for redevelopment? Is it the ability for density, basically?
That's probably one of the first ones, is based on what's currently there today to what would be allowable, or through a process of rezoning, would there be additional density? The other is the financial sustainability of a new project. And as well, if a relocation is required, the ability to ensure a relocation of the co-op there temporarily or into a new space, are probably the key factors.
And what about the age of the respective buildings? How does that factor into sort of the range of consideration?
There is the opportunity cost of continuing to have that housing there, right? And versus developing new. And so when we consider a redevelopment candidate, something that would have fairly significant density from what is there today, and it would be condition specific to how the co-op has maintained that building to date.
But I guess put a different way, are we going to be maximizing the lifespan of these existing buildings?
There is possibly some trade-offs. I mean, these buildings could be maintained for a long period of time, but then that maintenance cost may start to potentially erode affordability and financial sustainability of the co-op. And so there's also the trade-off of that additional density that could be created. and creating new housing in Vancouver. So there is a bit of triangulation there that needs to happen site by site.
Okay. On switching gears, on sort of the income discussion and you know the different philosophical points that have been put forward, 25%, 35% median Vancouver income, median Vancouver rental income. Was there any sort of qualitative aspect to the consideration from staff that generally speaking, co-ops have renters have lower incomes and people in co-ops have even lower incomes? And that by not acknowledging that in the staff's model, that it would be eroding affordability?
Grayson, would you like to speak to that?
Thank you. So one of the things that to note about Vancouver median income renters income is that it does include a lot of students, proportionally high, which would reduce that. So just of note, but that was the biggest qualitative difference that we could bring. The other one is just to note that co-ops also access a homeowners grant, so they see themselves as somewhere in between as owners.
And what is the actual median Vancouver rental income versus median Vancouver income?
That can be a quick answer because Councillor Kirby Young is out of time. So just a quick answer, please.
Grayson or
I'm going to ask Rob.
Or maybe George has it. Rob, yeah.
For a two-person household, the median household income is 76,000 versus 66,000 for a renter household. For a three-person household, it's 89,000 versus 72,600.
Thank you.
Right, thank you, Councillor Kirby Young. And over to you, Councillor Fry, up to 5 minutes.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Seeing nobody on the list, I was hoping to move the recommendation.
Okay, I'm going to just move us to the main queue and I'll put you on that list.
Thanks, Chair.
Great.
I just, I've also submitted an amendment to the clerk, and I just want to start off by really thanking staff for all the work that's gone into this, and thanking all the speakers who have come to comment on this motion. I guess, are you going to move me to an amendment queue and pull up the amendment that I submitted?
I'm going to do that. Thank
Sure.
you.
Thanks.
So you've just submitted it? Great. I'm going to just let me get you on that queue again. Go ahead, Councillor Fry, up to 5 minutes.
Yeah, and as I introduce this amendment, I just want to reflect on the comments the city manager made earlier, which really highlighted the role of the staff have done a really excellent job working with the Co-op Housing Federation to get to this place, and there's been a tremendous amount of work, and this has been a file that's been languishing for a great many years, and we're finally seeing it come to some kind of resolution. And I really want to commend our staff for the incredible amount of work that's gone into getting us here. But as the city manager alluded, there's also a role for us as councillors to take a less technical approach and more of a policy and public approach, and that's what this amendment is to do. And I think it behooves me to suggest that this I think reflects a lot of the concerns that everyone on this council has been hearing, and this is I believe really something that's I'm hoping reflective of the general will of council, and that is support for the co-op model as we see it and what they're delivering. So the amendment that is submitted is that in recognition of the unique operating model of existing co-ops requiring lease renewals for existing buildings, that the non-RGI unit benchmark component of the renewal methodology be changed from 25% of median Vancouver income to 25% of median Vancouver renter income, provided that no housing charges are decreased. I think this is an important distinction that recognizes the difference between median incomes and median renter incomes in the city of Vancouver. And further, that this amendment also contemplates extending the transition grant from 7 years to 10 years, really to give a bit of a buffer to those non-RGI. That we don't want to break the co-op model, and I think that this is a reflection of, I think, what we've all heard, that the co-op model has been incredibly successful in the city of Vancouver, and it's delivered not just housing affordability, but a tremendous sense of community, and it's working. And I think we want to support that, and we don't want to break it. And I'm hoping this is something that council will get behind, and also recognizing that that we really do appreciate the work that staff have put in on this file. And this is by no means a repudiation of staff's work, but rather a reflection of council priorities and respecting the technical side that the staff have struggled with on this one. So I'm going to pass the mic because I know everybody else wants to comment on this.
Great. Thank you, Councillor Fry. To the amendment, Councillor Boyle.
Thanks, Chair Carr. I will be relatively brief. I also want to echo the huge amount of work over years now that's gone in from city staff, from the Co-op Housing Federation staff team, and co-op members really wrestling at so many stages through some pretty dense fiscal frameworks and proposals and running numbers for their members. I am happy to support this. I really appreciate, particularly in the last week, the work that's gone into these last details and trying to find a solution that that brings us together in a way that will meet the needs of co-op members, reflected by many of the statements yesterday. In particular, one of the concerns that I had, that we heard from co-op members, was that all of the folks in that gap who are above hills but below median household income, for whom the numbers were looking pretty nerve-wracking, and we know lots of families in particular don't have a lot of wiggle room in their budgets. And so I will just say, I think moving that median down to renter income brings it a lot closer and more relevant for many of those folks stuck right in the middle. And I don't need to remind the council or the public, those are many critical frontline workers and low-wage workers across our city who we really want to make sure we're not squeezing out. So I think that balances nicely, and similarly extending the 7-year transition to 10 is an important way to make sure that we're not losing people quickly, that people can adapt as needed, and we can watch how it plays out. So again, I'm happy to support this. I think it really responds responsibly to a lot of the feedback that we've been hearing, and I hope we can pass it strongly. Also, Chair Carr, I'll just note you didn't start my time. I'm sure I'm under it, but
you're well under 5
yes,
minutes. But
yeah, no problem. Okay, thank you. I'll leave it at that.
Great, thank you. Okay, and on to you, Mayor Stewart.
Thanks very much, Chair Carr. Just wanted to thank Councillor Fry for putting this amendment forward. We've had many hours of discussion on this, and I really like the spirit of the discussion. It was really listening and trying to get to a better place for everybody. And I think that is different perhaps than what we've had over the previous years. And so I really commend council for all the work you've been doing on this. I was on the phone today with, I think, I don't know, a couple of ministers, 2 provincial, 2 federal, and just to let you know that folks in Ottawa and Victoria are watching this, because this is such a valuable component of our affordable housing and a model of how we should be moving forward. So I do think it's essential that we do come to agreement here this evening and show not just the city but the province and the country about that. Not only are we committed to co-ops, we're committed to having them grow in our city. So I really think this is a good step forward. And so I know we might have more to say later on, but just wanted to say thank you to Councillor Fry, and I'll be supporting this amendment.
Thank you so much, Mayor Stewart. And on to you, Councillor Bligh.
Thanks, Chair.
Yeah, I'll just speak directly to the amendment and then save any further comments to the broader report for later with potentially more amendments. But I just wanted to acknowledge the staff work, as others have, in bringing forward an extremely technical recommendation to council based on sort of the guides that we have, and one of which, of course, is the Vancouver Charter. And I think that staff have brought forward something that they demonstrated fiscal responsibility in terms of the construct of the charter. And as our city manager mentioned, and Councillor Fry mentioned, and I've been reflecting on this today, actually, after listening to the speakers yesterday, is that this is actually the role of our council, is to create value, or to acknowledge that there is inherent value in the community and sort of social capital beyond the land value of co-ops, and the stability within that housing, and how that sort of ripples out to the rest of the city, and that there is immense value. And I think that that's where we sort of navigate a bit more of a gray area on council, and this amendment does that by ensuring that we are not risking sort of hollowing out of our co-ops from the many levels of income ranges that make the co-ops a very cohesive, holistic, and well-balanced environment for families to raise their children, for grandparents to see generational change, and for seniors and singles all to sort of cohabitate and create a life really together. And so I'm really quite happy to support this, as I heard loud and clear from the good work of our staff, but through CHFBC, that this really was the difference maker for them in terms of the financial structure of these lease renewals that would give them the stability that they've had all along. So I'm really happy to support that. And as my question sort of suggested yesterday, we have to be very mindful that many people who live in co-ops are either on fixed incomes or work in public sector or other sectors where that sort of rate of change in terms of their annual income is pretty limited to the 2 to 3%. And so housing costs increasing to 4 to 10% compounded year over year over 7 years is actually going to risk that housing. And so changing that to 10 years, as I understand, will really bring that back into a manageable pace of change for the individuals that live in co-ops. So really happy to support these amendments and recognize that it's a middle ground to what the request was coming from CHFBC and working with their membership, and what the city brought forward. And that is very much the role, I would say, of this council, is to be listening to the speakers yesterday who had extremely raw and vulnerable and emotional testimony about why this matters. And it was impactful, and I do appreciate hearing from every single speaker that spoke. So very happy to support, and I appreciate we found a middle ground.
Thank you, Councillor Bligh. Councillor Hardwick, over to you for up to 5 minutes.
For you, Chair, I have a question for Councillor Fry as the mover of this amendment.
Point of information, go ahead.
Point of information. What does as needed mean? That the 7-year transition grant be extended as needed? Why not just be extended to 10 years?
Councillor Fry?
Yeah, I think that's a reflection of the notion that the spirit of co-ops suggests that folks who may be making higher incomes might not need that transition grant, that they may readily say, you know what, I don't need it, I'm making enough money, I can afford to take this this transition without the need for a grant.
Who makes that determination? Well,
we've kind of reflected that I think we respect the autonomy of the cooperatives, so that would be up to the cooperatives, I suppose.
Okay. I know that the CHFBC's original approach is seen as a superior one by them, but I think it's most important for co-ops to get an outcome that they can live with tonight. And for that reason, I will support this amendment.
Thanks, Councillor Hardwick. Councillor Kirby Young, over to you, up to 5 minutes to the amendment.
Yeah, I want to ask 2 clarifying points of information through you to staff, if I could.
Yes.
The first one is just because language is really important, and I just want to be really clear. Can staff reflect back what they understand the language provided that no housing charges are decreased to mean in the context of this amendment?
Paul Mokri,
Mhm.
if you could
Thanks,
direct
Chair.
that.
I'll defer to Sandra on that one.
Yes, thank you, Sandra Singh, General Manager. In terms of the no housing charges are decreased because of the move to 25% median Vancouver income. Some of those benchmarks are well below the existing housing charges of existing co-ops and some of the modeling we did. So our anticipation would be that there would be no decreases in housing charges arising from the adoption of that new benchmark.
For individuals or with the expectation that that would be applied co-op wide and by all co-ops?
Yeah, that would be the expectation. Yeah, that in adopting this much lower benchmark, that co-op housing charges aren't going to be scaled back. That they'll continue on their trajectory.
Okay, that's helpful. And thank you. And then my second kind of point of information follow-up is also on following from Councillor Hardwick's. For the as needed for 10 years, I just want to be clear. Is that being suggested that the transition grant varies by co-op or by individual resident or unit in income?
Yeah, so we would on a case. Yes, on a case by case basis, we would discuss with the co-op the need for any transition grants. Transition grants in the model are income tested. So we would be looking at that and having that discussion with the co-op. I think further to the previous question, we would suggest that it would be something that would be in staff's discretion and discussions with the co-op. With the new benchmark that's being contemplated in this amendment, it's much lower, and so there actually may be many units that actually don't even need transition grant because their annual housing charge increases could be even lower than 2% or 2%.
Sure. It allows more art. It allows more. I just want to jump in for time. It allows more art than science to really address
exactly.
Where this might have had this amendment not happened, it may have had a more punitive effect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it gives discretion based on the situation.
Okay, thanks. And then speaking to the amendment, I'm also happy to support the amendment. I think that this is a signal of council really being responsive to what we heard from the community. I actually really like to thank all of the co-op members and CHFBC who are really generous with sharing not just sort of their experiences, qualitatively, which I think is fundamentally important and can't be discounted in how we model a paradigm moving forward, but in their experience of how they have managed to achieve much deeper levels of affordability and the reality of who's living in those co-ops and what their incomes are. And I think it's really challenging in Vancouver. It's one thing to have this sort of establish your standard. I wouldn't say it's an artificial metric. It's more of probably an established metric is the best way to put it, of 30% of income. But if your incomes in your city are generally lower, we're not a high income city. If your housing market is generally higher and you're one of the most expensive, it doesn't mean a whole lot when you have an actual number, when you're actually dealing with people's real income. And so I think for me, this is a reflection of the fact that renters earn, generally speaking, less. Incomes in Vancouver are not high. In general, co-ops have been doing a really well-documented job over decades in terms of delivering greater levels of affordability than they were actually mandated to do. And having people that sit at those different income levels and much higher percentages than the city has actually achieved in some of our own other social housing developments. And I think that that's really important to note and to recognize. And from my perspective, these are the experts that have actually been delivering on and fulfilling the co-op model over years. And it gave me great discomfort to have a sort of a theoretical model to apply as opposed to being guided by the lived experience of the folks that are actually administrating those co-ops and who have been working in the sector and have that perspective. So for that reason, I am happy to support the amendment. Thank you.
Pretty perfectly timed, Councillor Kirby Young. Thank you. Councillor Swanson, up to 5 minutes.
Yeah, I support the amendment too.
I've heard that the Co-op Housing Foundation can live with it. I personally don't like the idea of tying co-ops to the market, and this ties their charges to rental income, so it's a bit farther removed from the market, so that's good. I actually don't like the idea of richer renters having to subsidize poorer renters, or richer co-op members having to subsidize poorer co-op members. I think that subsidizing should happen with a progressive tax, a mansion tax, a wealth tax, a progressive income tax. But we don't have that now, and we do have lots of people who would love to get into co-ops, paying not very much rent. We have lots of homeless people. We have lots of people on the BC housing wait list. And this will give us hopefully a little bit of money that we can put into for more affordability and co-ops in those other areas. So I think it's a good down the middle type of thing, and I support it.
Thanks, Councillor Swanson. Clerk, I see no one else on the list, so if you could please move us to a vote. We are voting on the amendment, Council by Councillor Fry. It is up on the screen. Okay, and that is unanimous. Okay, I'm going to, thanks, Council, move us back to the main queue. Councillor Fry, do you have anything else to say?
I'm going to come back, Chair, if that's okay. I'm
Yep.
going to make space for some of my colleagues.
Totally. Councillor Weeb, go ahead to the amended motion.
Yeah, first, I want to thank all the co-op members. Every time I hear from them, I want to move into a co-op, and I want all my friends to move in co-ops. The ability to create community is completely lost in so much of the city, and I think every time I hear you speak, or someone that's lost and found a co-op and has just increased their well-being and livelihood, to me, always makes me want to wonder how we could make a full city that has that same feeling. I think it's something that's absolutely beautiful. One of the things I also love about co-ops is when we talk about someone feeling hardship or having a bad couple months or losing their job, and the co-op being able to be flexible. And the fact that we've been able to lower the benchmark, move from 30% to 25, go from median income to renter income, push it from 7 to 10 years, and be able to increase ROI gives the flexibility to co-op. So I've sent a little amendment in on one of the things I think really makes co-op special, just to affirm our support, because I think it's critical of how co-ops have the autonomy to do housing charges and ensure that they're providing the right income levels for the right people.
Great. That's it for your comments?
That's it.
Great. Thank you, Councillor Weeb. Councillor Boyle.
I said I put an amendment in on that.
I'm sorry, that was your opportunity to do an amendment?
Yeah, and I said I have an amendment that I put forward.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't hear that. My apologies. I am going to move us to an amendment queue then, and clear that queue because we are in a new amendment. And I will add you to the list for that. Go ahead, Councillor Weeb.
Yeah, and I think I spoke to it, and this is about ensuring that co-ops have the autonomy and that we as council support that as such a critical part of the traditional co-op model, and something that we want to continue to see, and hopefully we can increase the supply in co-ops here in Vancouver that will also be able to do this work and ensure that people that do feel hardship are taken care of, because that's part of society, and it's something I think co-ops do better than the rest of society.
Okay, Councillor Kirby Young, to the amendment. Go ahead. Let me just set your timer. Go ahead.
Oh, thanks so much. Just had a point of information through you to staff, if I might.
Absolutely.
I understood during one of the rounds of questions, I think it was yesterday, and some of the staff presentation, that they affirmed that this was already in the report and already in the modeling, that the co-ops had retained that autonomy to administer and retained the temporary hardship assistance, and that was something best left to co-ops, I'm paraphrasing, but within their operating model and management. So I thought that was already contained in the report. Did I not hear that yesterday?
Okay, Paul Mokri?
Thanks, Chair. So generally, yes, we believe that the principle that's kind of set out here is built into the methodology. So this is obviously a statement that further affirms that. We don't see that it changes in any material way the methodology that staff have recommended.
But it's already there, right?
We believe it is, so I think it's up to council to determine whether the statement of affirmation is appropriate and necessary.
Okay, thanks. I would say, in my view, it's not. I really would like council to sort of continue coming together on this one, but I don't see the necessity in passing. These are my comments in passing something that's already contained in the report.
Okay. That's it for your comments, Councillor Kirby Young?
Yeah, I'm just hesitating because I just want to keep this up in a positive tone. I don't want to roll it out of order, but it's already there. So I'm just wondering if maybe the mover would like to consider that.
I could ask that, or I don't think
I'll leave it for the mover. Those are my comments.
Thank you, Councillor Kirby Young.
Maybe I could just add, sorry, Chair, that the spirit of it is that I really want to make sure that we have clear information to the public around what is in the report and what is being passed and what wasn't. And I don't want to convey to the public that this was not the intent or this was not in the report when it was. And because I think information about this very complex and emotional topic is important, and that's why I'm raising it. Thanks.
Yeah, I hear you, Councillor Kirby Young. And if I can just respond as chair to that, I believe that there were a number of speakers that questioned whether or not the autonomy of the co-ops would be retained. And in my view as chair, I'm taking this as a response to those speakers that we heard last night, even though the report does basically include the absolute authority and independence of co-ops, their autonomy and flexibility in this regard. I feel that this is a response to the speakers that I heard last night question whether or not that would be the case. But I do see that there are other speakers. Unless you have further comment, Councillor Kirby Young?
No, I was done.
Thank you. Councillor Boyle, go ahead.
Chair Carr, and I was just going to briefly also say I'm comfortable supporting this. While I appreciate the general instinct to be as clear and simple as possible, I also heard this as a question from many speakers. It's a question I've been fielding from many co-op members that I've been hearing from. And so, you know, in a big report, I think given the concern we've heard, it's certainly worthwhile to be reiterating here and supporting as is. And so I'm comfortable with having it included and supporting it for that reason of reassurance and clarification.
Thank you, Councillor Boyle. Councillor Hardwick, go ahead.
Yeah, just noting that I think we already have it in the framework, but it never hurts to remind staff of what council meant to say. That's been a problem in the past, so for that reason, I'll support it.
Thank you, Councillor Hardwick. Clerk, I see no speakers on this queue to this amendment, so if you could take us to a vote, please. Councillor Swanson, you haven't yet voted. Okay, that is unanimous. Thank you, Council. And back to the main queue. Councillor Weeb, I believe you had a bit of time before I moved us to the amendment queue. I'm not sure if you wanted to add yourself.
No, I'll finish my comments.
Sorry, I just 1 second. Unless I don't have the time that you've taken up already, unless I think maybe if I get you back on the list, I would be able to. Or clerk, if you could assist me to see how much time Councillor Weep has left on this main queue.
3 minutes and 39 seconds.
Thank you, Councillor Weep. I'm not seeing that on my machine, but go ahead. 3 minutes and 39 seconds.
Yes, sorry, it's the clerk here. It's currently at 1 minute, 21 seconds.
Okay. Clerk, if you could either put Councillor Weeb at the top of the list so that I can manage that timer or manage the time in some other way, I'd appreciate that. And you're adding back in the speakers in that order? Great. Councillor Weeb, go ahead. Sorry for the interruption.
No, all good. I love this collaborative process. I think it's been great to hear from all the speakers, from all the co-ops, all the emails, all the stories, as well as all the work done by staff. I think they listed off 20 answers at the start of today's meeting, but there's been so many more. And so just the time commitment and collaborative effort that we've gone through has really felt good. And I think it's great when we're making good decisions with lots of information and from a good place. So really appreciate staff's work, SAGE staffs, all the councils, everyone that's emailed us, called us, met with us, and everyone around this table. So really appreciate everyone's work on this. I think it's been an amazing process and really delicate subject that's really important, and I think could be leading the way we deal with affordability moving forward.
Thank you, Councillor Weeb. Okay, Councillor Swanson, to the amended motion.
Oh, I support the. I have another amendment to make, but I don't think this is the time, right?
Sorry, I got a siren that's interrupting my ability to hear. Councillor Swanson, this is the time when you would put forward an amendment. We're on the main queue.
Okay, I do have an amendment then. It's, I sent it in. It's
great. I'm going to move us to amendment queue. Councillor Swanson, go ahead.
For the clerk, if you could put up the one I sent about equity. It's got a little list of, the idea is to work with the, yeah. Oh, well, this one will work. So to work with the community housing sector and come up with recommendations for a metric that's more fair than 30% of before tax income. I think one of the problems that we've had during the discussions about co-ops is what happens if someone is slightly above rent geared to income level, but maybe they're a single parent and their childcare expenses are way more than their housing expenses and they're paying off student loans. So what can we do to make this percentage, this 30%, which is actually 30% of before taxes, so it's kind of unfair there. What can we do to make it more equitable? So this is just to try and come up with a process for figuring that out.
Okay, that's great. Councillor Swanson, I'm going to turn to Councillor Dominato to speak to this amendment.
Thanks, Chair. I just have a question through you to staff about what they envision this would look like in terms of taking on this work, and just in terms of time, because it is actually pretty substantive when I look at it, but I'm curious what staff think that would be in terms of a deliverable.
Okay, and Paul Mokry, over to you for that.
Thanks, Chair. Of course, we're seeing this amendment just this evening for the first time ourselves, so we will have to dig into that. It's hard to say at this point in time. We do have, I mean, I would say our housing team has a lot of work on its plate. You know, things that council has asked us to look at. We would add this to that list. So I couldn't articulate at this point in time when we might be able to do this, but we certainly understand the intent and could undertake those discussions, in the context of all the other work that the housing team's got on their plate right now.
Okay. Councillor Dominato?
Thanks, Chair.
All right, thank you. And Councillor Bligh, over to you for the speak to the amendment.
Thanks, Chair. I also have a point of information, and my point of information is having just previously passed Councillor Weeb's amendment that basically gives that agency to the individual co-ops to support their members based on any sort of nuanced hardship, whether it's childcare or what have you. I'm just wondering how staff would contemplate this amendment in the context of the previous amendment we just passed, which seems to, I agree with Councillor Swanson's rationale, but just before sending staff to do this work, I wonder in the context of the previous amendment how this would fit in, and appreciating the city manager's previous comments to Councillor Dominato's. I just need further clarification.
Thank you. As a point of information, over to you again, Paul Mulqueen.
Sure, thanks. And sorry, Chair, I just lost my other screen here, so I want to make sure I'm referring to the correct amendment. This is the amendment that talks about staff working with the Community Housing Center to come up with recommendations to provincial and federal government.
Correct.
Yes. So this is more of a policy. I read this as more of a policy discussion, and it would involve advocacy to senior governments. So it doesn't have any direct impact on the lease renewals. This would be more of, again, as I understand, policy work that we would be undertaking separate from that.
Okay, I understand that. That is good context. So I guess my comments are, I'd prefer to see this in a motion, a separate motion. I think we are at risk of moving, and as we have done before as a council, sort of stacking on a whole number of policy directions that are connected to, but not germane to the actual decision that we're making. And I'm not going to support it because it is good work to do, but I think, as Councillor Kirby Young previously acknowledged, I think it's more helpful for us to just stay hyper-focused on what we're here to do tonight and deal with the co-op lease renewal and any other policy ideas that have come out of the discussions or listening to speakers be moved as proper motion so that they can be researched and considered fully by councillors before making decisions, rather than this type of on the fly, on the floor that we've sort of fallen to, which results in hundreds of policy directions and motions that staff have to deal with that are clearly not going to get done in the next however long year. So I'll support it, but it does become a bit of a frustrating process when we would go down this road. So I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Councillor Bligh. Council, there's no other councillors on the list to speak. So clerk, if you could move us to a vote on this particular amendment, please. That vote has, oh, Councillor Hardwick, I don't see that you voted. Thank you. That vote has passed unanimously. Okay, we are back now to the main queue. Councillor Swanson, you are still on the main queue to speak to the motion.
Yeah, I sent another amendment in, and this one is to delete a section of the appendix that reads redevelopment potential assessment new space lease. Oh, it's not that one. It's the next one. Clerk, can you put up the other one?
Chair Carr, it's the clerk here. We only had received 2 amendments from Councillor Swanson. The first one was just approved, and
Okay.
this was the second one.
Okay, this one is just to encourage CHF to work with the co-ops to implement equity measures that a lot of people talked about when they came and spoke to us, including overhousing policy, promoting diversity, women having principal memberships, that kind of thing. Sliding scale parking, making most 2 and 3 bedroom units available to larger families, making sure that accessible units are available to people in wheelchairs.
Okay, that's it for your introduction, Councillor Swanson.
That is it.
Okay. Over to you to the amendment, Councillor Boyle. Oh, darn. Sorry, I'm so sorry. I'm on the main queue. That is my error. I'm going to, clerk, I'm going to move us over to the amendment queue, but if you could leave Councillor Swanson on that main queue. I don't know how much time she had left. Councillor Boyle, you, sorry, I'm now in the amendment queue. So if anybody wants to speak to this particular amendment, you can add yourself to the list for that. Councillor Kirby Young.
Yeah, thanks. I might sound a bit like Councillor Bligh here. I think we're doing it again because I heard yesterday, I think it was CHFBC that stated that at a recent, it was an AGM or a recent meeting, that there had been a motion that was fully adopted and fully supported by their members towards working towards greater diversity in co-ops across the board, and a number of individual co-op members spoke to the fact they have struck diversity committees and that this is something that is they are very cognizant of and is very much on their radar. And I think that we heard quite loud and clear that a lot of them are doing it, that they're sort of governing our sector organization indicated that this has been strongly embraced by them. And further, I think there's this notion of autonomy in governance around those co-ops. Some of them support particularly members of the Indigenous community. Others have particularly supported a number of single moms or whatever the case is when it makes sense. But I heard loud and clear that this is something that they've identified, that they think it's important, they know it's important, they've passed resolutions and they're moving forward. So I think we're doing it again. And we're adding on to Councillor Bligh's point, a lot of amendments instead of sort of staying really focused on the significant material report and moving that model forward to provide the certainty to the co-op so that they can get going on getting their leases renewed. So I was just sort of hoping that we wouldn't go down these rabbit holes unless we're adding something that is materially different, has been missed, or is really a sort of a challenge in the report that has to be dealt with. So those are my comments.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Kirby Young. Councillor Bligh to the amendment.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, so I mean, I saw these amendments come through in an email as well, and I actually deeply respect the person who suggested that they come forward, who spoke yesterday, but who also said there'll be a lot of other council or co-op members who might be mad at me and my comments because they're not all aligned on these issues. And I think if we're going to respect the autonomy and independence of co-ops as a philosophical discussion, this is in complete contrast to that. We either respect their autonomy and their independence to manage and govern themselves, or we don't. And so I am going to vote against this, not because I don't support what's inside this, but that it's in complete, it's a complete 180 from everything we're doing in this meeting, which is honoring them to be able to self-determine what works best for their co-ops. So yeah, I'm beyond this. Yeah, anyway, I'll leave it there. I'm voting against this for those reasons. I respect the co-ops. I think they make the best decisions for themselves based on where they are. They sit around a table much like we do. They debate issues and they make the decisions for themselves. So I'm not going to be a government that sits in our chambers and tells them how to run their co-op. That's not what we're here to do. So I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Councillor Bligh. So we have no other councillors on the list. We could, clerk, could you move us to a vote on this amendment by Councillor Swanson? And I'm not sure, I've had a message from Councillor Fry that his computer is rebooting. And so clerks, if you could just verify that he is, verify his status and whether or not he needs a vote assist.
I'm just checking, Chair Carr. Give me a moment, please.
Thank you.
So Chair Carr, I do see him on the WebEx. We'd need to check to see if he's able to communicate with his computer. So I could have IT check that before the vote, if you like.
He is on WebEx. You're seeing him?
I see him on WebEx.
Yeah. Okay. I think that this qualifies for a councillor us reaching out and making sure we don't.
Sorry, Chair Carr, I have to interrupt you.
Yes?
It's disappeared, so he must be sort of on and off.
Okay, so in that case, if he's not there, can you please advise, are we under then no obligation to reach out to him for?
Yes, if you're about to vote.
Chair, point of procedure, you have people on the queue, members of on the queue. I'm not sure if you see that there, just in case you're about to call the vote.
Right. Okay. Perhaps, thank you. Maybe I'll move forward with those. You're right, they're on the amendment queue. Thank you for pointing that out. I'm sorry, I was trying to read messages.
Meanwhile, Chair Carr, we will check on Councillor Fry.
Thank you so much. Councillor Kirby Young, to the amendment.
Yeah, thank you. I felt compelled in listening to Councillor Bligh just to sort of add an additional comment. She picked up on one point I was trying to make, but I think made it more vociferously, if I can say that. And it was really around the notion of the autonomy of co-ops. And I think that, yes, we didn't get into sort of management by extension or social engineering. And that's how these communities have created themselves organically. So that's, Councillor Bligh sort of picked up on my thought and expressed it, I think, in a more fulsome way. But I'm standing on that same principle of autonomy. Of they know this. They're evolving, just as our whole city is. Let them do what they do best. That is the entire point of this conversation, is to honor the independence and autonomy of the co-op model with some responsible parameters around the use of a city asset and city land. That's what we're trying to do here, pure and simple, as opposed to getting to this level of engineering. And I could have stand with Councillor Bligh on this for that reason. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Kirby Young. Councillor Hardwick.
Yeah, it's funny, I also noted micromanaging social engineering, and I'm doubled over thinking about how co-ops will be able to build a lease framework around introducing sliding scale parking fees. I think it's over the top, and I think at a principle we need to let this level of operational work within the co-ops be handled by the people that are running the co-ops. So for that reason, I'm also going to not support this amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Hardwick. Okay, I do not see anyone else now on the amendment queue, and I do see Councillor Fry back on the screen. Anyway, I'm just, Councillor Fry, could you just verify that you are able to hear the proceedings now? Yeah.
Chair, I'm back. I'm not really sure what we're voting on though, and I'm trying to get my remote desktop my remote desktop up, so I'm a little flying blind.
All right. It is up on the screen in the chambers, so you can see it on your screen in terms of an amendment by Councillor Swanson. We have had the discussion though in your absence.
Yeah, like I say, I'm trying to get my remote desktop up, and I'm not quite there yet.
Fine. There's no one else on the queue. If you would like more time to enable, well, put it this way, you are there and able to vote. You can choose to not vote if you so choose. or, you know, but are you able to cast a vote at this point, Councillor Fry?
I could, yes. I do have my remote desktop up now, and I'm
Yeah.
seeing the amendment. I'm just
Okay.
trying to grok it right now. I mean, if you were willing to indulge me a couple of minutes, that would be great. But
Okay, you're back. I'm happy to give you a minute to read the amendment. And everybody else has got the amendment up there. It's on the chamber screen, and it's on your WebEx as well. So clerk will move to a vote in a minute.
Chair?
Yes.
Sorry, just because I'm kind of late at the table on this particular amendment, would it be possible for me to ask a clarifying, because I missed the whole conversation, unfortunately.
I'm going to put you on, we are not in a vote. I'm going to put you on the amendment queue, Councillor Fry, so that you may ask points of information through me on that queue. Go ahead.
Sure, and forgive me if this has been asked. Like I say, I did miss the conversation, and such as the reality of our virtual settings. Has it been asked of the city manager if this is interpreted as a directive, or kind of a really just a simple encouragement that doesn't necessarily have any teeth per se, like an aspirational goal?
Yes.
If you will.
Okay. And over to you, city manager.
Thanks, Chair. And again, I want to make sure I'm referring to the correct amendment.
This is the one which is sorry, it's very tiny print here. That council right to CHFBC, encouraging them to support their co-op members in the development of, and there's quite a long list of things.
Gotcha. And thanks very much, Chair. Sorry about that. Again, I'm having some technical problems here. This is obviously a direction from council to itself to provide correspondence to CHFBC. So from a staff perspective, we don't see this as impacting our work in a material way. This would be encouragement from council to CHFBC. So yeah, in that respect, it's, and maybe I misunderstood Councillor Fry's question. But.
Actually, no, thank you, city manager. As I noted, I'm just sort of reading it now and trying to juggle this. So I appreciate your interpretation, and I see that now, that it really is just a council thing. Okay. Thanks,
All right.
thanks, Chair. Thanks, city manager.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. It seems to be a night of technical difficulties, so thank you, Councillor Fry. And now, clerk, if you wouldn't mind moving us to a vote on this amendment by Councillor Swanson. Councillor Dominato. Oh, okay. That does pass with 3 in opposition. Councillors Hardwick, Bligh, and Kirby Young. Okay. That takes us back to our main queue, Council. Councillor Boyle, you actually, I thought that perhaps Councillor Swanson was on the main queue. Clerk, did you note whether or not she had any time left. I see the clerk is conferring on that. I did inadvertently remove.
Sorry, I had missed your question, Chair Carr. You were looking to see if Councillor Swanson still had time?
That's right, because I did inadvertently remove her from the
Okay.
list.
Yes,
Thank you.
she has a total of 2 minutes used.
Okay. If you could put her on, she should be on before Councillor Boyle and Councillor Kirby Young because she was the last to move an amendment. I'm sorry about that.
That's okay. I'll go later.
I'll let the
Sure.
clerk complete this. I'll let the clerk complete this and then I'll move you. Great. The clerk is faster than the speed of lightning. Councillor Boyle, you are up next.
Thank you, Chair Carr. I also circulated an amendment earlier, and so I'm happy to have you move us to an amendment queue, and then I'll read
Yes.
it.
And we'll get it up on the screen. And I'm just going to
Great. So it just says that staff report back to council with options for further investment or other support to the co-op housing sector that could deepen affordability for lower income co-op members and or enable the creation of new co-op housing units across the city, recognizing the importance of co-op housing in Vancouver. We know that there are a number of tools that we have in our toolbox to be able to support the sector. Well, I hope that some of the lease payments from existing co-ops can help build new co-ops. I also don't think we need to just be stuck in that sort of circular process. We have many tools in terms of investments, but also in terms of zoning and beyond that we can use to support the expansion of the co-op sector. And we heard really clearly how much it means to people who are already there. We know how many people are on lists to get into the sector. And so I'd hope in line with all of the work that we're doing on these leases, which is incredibly important, that we also look beyond that as well, in line with that commitment to expand these types of opportunities to so many more people. And again, I think the importance of this work was emphasized by so many folks yesterday. So I will just leave it at that.
Great. Thank you, Councillor Boyle. I do not see anyone else. Oh, there we go. We do have Councillor Kirby Young to the amendment.
Yeah, thanks. I'm going to ask a similar question that Councillor Boyle often asks through you to staff if I can, which is, can you reaffirm some of the work that's already being done? I understood that in the Housing Vancouver review and the Vancouver plan that there was already work to look at additional more affordable housing types, including co-op and others. And I believe that there was even an amendment made by Councillor Boyle on a motion by Councillor Dominato that the mayor amended significantly to include co-op as part of that. So I could cite a number of different examples, but through that, has council not already given direction or staff not already working on looking at co-ops as part of our housing mix in terms of affordable options? City manager?
Actually, it's through me. So you're asking me to, on a point of information, and I will direct your question to the city manager.
Thanks, Chair Carr. So yes, we have received direction on co-ops. Staff are looking at that. This again is an explicit request for a report back on options for further investment. So we're certainly able to deliver on this motion if council decides to pass it.
Councillor Kirby Young?
Thank you, Chair. I think the city manager is being really tactful, but I just feel like we're adding a whole bunch of amendments for things that are already underway, already in the report. or simply have been dealt with, and we're detracting from, I think, a really significant piece of work from staff and from the Co-op Housing Federation here that should be the focus for tonight. So I'm just really wondering if this is redundant, Chair, based on for those reasons that I have cited. I know Councillor Boyle often talks about adding additional work, and we've already given direction on looking at other co-op housing opportunities. I'm wondering, Chair, if you feel this is redundant based on the examples that I cited.
Yeah, thank you. I would have to confer with the city manager. My initial read is I don't remember any particular previous motion that looked at deepening affordability for lower income co-op members. So that piece I'm unclear, but if you would like a ruling, I will confer with the city manager on this.
I think we do have the motions that, or the examples that I cited, such as the Vancouver plan or the direction on the housing motion that was referred to staff that they're working on now, but do include language around enabling the creation of new co-op housing units.
I think the creation of new co-op housing units, you may be right on. I'm happy to take a moment and confer with the city manager to affirm whether or not this is work. So I'm sorry, is this an actual, so are you calling a point of order on this and asking for?
Pursuant to section 8.7, that conflicts with, presents substantially the same question as motions council has previously decided.
Yes. Okay. Fine, we'll take the time to take a little break anyway. We'll take it's 7:54. Why don't we come back at 8 o'clock? done a search, clerks have just done a search and couldn't find a motion that actually specifically had the same direction in it as this. There was others with other kinds of direction, but nothing exactly the same. But I will ask city manager to comment on that.
Thanks, Chair Carr. So yes, as I mentioned, certainly city staff are doing work in relation to co-ops, and I think we can report back to council on that. But this is a relatively broadly worded motion, so I do believe that it would encompass potentially options that are beyond the scope of the work we're doing now. So in that respect, I wouldn't see it as entirely redundant with direction we received previously.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. So I am not going to rule this out of order. Councillor Kirby Young, your timer was reset because unfortunately it kept going, but I believe if the clerk could set it that you were at about 2 minutes. So you still have another 3 minutes.
No, I've made my comments. I think that I do think this work is underway, and I did cite specific examples, so I've made my comments. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, clerk, I think you can take us to a vote. This is on the amendment by Councillor Boyle. It's up on your screens, councillors. Councillor Swanson, Hardwick, and Kirby Young, are they present?
I'm just checking, Chair Carr.
Thank you. I don't see Councillor Swanson. Councillor Swanson?
Yes.
You have not yet voted?
We will try calling her, Chair Carr.
Thank you. Okay, that does pass unanimously. So we are back to the main queue now. Councillor Boyle, you still have quite a lot of time. Councillor Boyle?
Yes, maybe I will say a few things on the motion now while I'm on the list, which is to say, I know we have all reiterated this, but really want to recognize the huge amount of work that's gotten us to this point from city staff, from the CHFBC team, and from co-op members and residents. The stories we heard yesterday were incredibly moving, and they really highlighted what an important form of housing co-op housing is in Vancouver. It means the world to current co-op members, as we heard, and there are so many more Vancouver residents hoping to get into co-ops, so many more that in fact many co-ops, as council's heard before, have had to close their waiting lists because the interest so far exceeds the space. I've been thinking back to local playwright Marcus Youssef's words to council a couple months ago, that so many of the arts and culture workers he knows across the city who have been able to remain in Vancouver are still here because they live in co-ops. They're still able to do the arts and culture work that makes our city so vibrant because they live in co-ops. This is a successful and meaningful and affordable form of housing. It's community-oriented, deeply community-oriented. It's what we need and so much more of it. So I've put a lot of thought and time into this lease question since being elected because it matters so much to me and to so many people. This has been a stressful week for so many people and a stressful process. But I am very glad to see us move forward in a way that will both protect and support current co-op members and also will work on expanding co-op housing so that even more people can move into co-ops in the coming years. And I hope the steps that we need to take, I was glad to see council support my amendment. I hope some of those more courageous moves through zoning, through further investments are steps that we take as well. Because as we've heard so loud and clear this week, this is housing people need, and it's housing that is enriching lives and communities across the city. And I will leave it there. Thanks, Chair Carr.
Thank you, Councillor Boyle. And Councillor Swanson to the amended motion.
Yeah, I have another, my last, fortunately, amendment. This is the one called about redevelopment. Which I did send in.
So I'm going to just move us to an amendment queue.
So this is a,
just a second, Councillor Swanson. Okay. I'm going to start your timer on the amendment queue. Go ahead.
This is a spur of the moment amendment for which I am sorry, but I've been getting quite a few emails from co-op residents in Falls Creek after they listened to the staff's answer to the questions about redevelopment. And they're thinking basically, yikes, we're on the table for redevelopment and we don't know about it. So this is just to delete the section of Appendix A that talks about redevelopment, which it sounds like from staff is mostly just considered for Falls Creek until they have a chance to discuss this with the Falls Creek co-ops. And I'm putting this forward in the spirit that we've been talking about tonight of co-op autonomy and consultation and how great co-ops are. And I also think that it's really important that when we're in the middle of a housing crisis, we have a principle that we don't destroy housing that has more years of life in it, and that any new housing we build on land that's vacant or not very densely populated in any event. So I'm hoping we can pass this. It wouldn't have to be too long of a delay. It would get our staff down there to talk to the folks and see what they think about it and give them a chance for some input.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Swanson. Councillor Dominato to the amendment.
Thanks, Chair. I have a question through you to staff. Could you just clarify, staff? My understanding is that this is one of many pieces of a framework for renewals, and it's not just applicable to Falls Creek, it's to all co-ops on public land. And so taking this out would then substantially change the framework that's been developed to date and that we've been discussing up till now. Is that correct?
And that would be, I'll direct that point of information to the city manager. Go ahead, Paul.
Thanks, Chair Carr. So yes, that's correct. This is part of again, a very complex agreement, most of which has been negotiated at length and discussed and agreed with CHFBC. So yes, removal would have a significant impact on the framework. I think the other thing I would say, just from a procedural perspective, is this would mean that we can't move forward. So it isn't possible to delete a provision temporarily. This would hold up the renegotiation of leases pending the discussion that's contemplated, and then we would have to come back to council essentially to repeat this process and to get a decision. So that's how we interpret the amendment from a procedural standpoint.
Okay. Thank you for that. I think on that basis, I'm not going to support the amendment. It's coming at a very late hour, and I don't think we're able to give it really due consideration, particularly as my understanding is that this has been negotiated, as you said, with CHFBC, and that there's a thoughtful process around whether there would be redevelopment. It's not imminent that there'll be redevelopment left, right, and center with co-ops. And maybe there's some fear, and I want to recognize and acknowledge that. But there's been a lot of work put into this, and as it is, we've already made some changes as a council, but I don't think this is one that we need to be embarking on today. And I certainly would not want to see this not go ahead after the many years of labor of putting into a really thoughtful framework, and particularly thoughtful, including engagement of council and the members who came and spoke over the last number of days, to hold it up and to not have it go forward. And I thought that was the desire of the co-ops and the CHFBC, was to see this resolved by the end of July. So I personally, I can't support it at this time.
Great, thank you, Councillor Dominato. Councillor Fry to this amendment.
Yeah, I won't be supporting this amendment either. I appreciate that there is a lot of anxiety around the future of South Falls Creek, but that is a separate and parallel process. What we're discussing today really is this methodology that's going to inform co-op renewals in the city of Vancouver, and I think that's an important conversation. And we have clearly deviated from the course of action that staff had presented to us and thrown a bit of a curveball. And I think that adding on top, this is a curveball on top of a curveball, and I don't know what that even looks like, but I think it's probably a bad idea, and that we should allow that process to unfold. And it's not written in stone yet, so I think there's plenty of opportunity for conversations that are ongoing with our staff, with South Falls Creek, to contemplate how this direction that we're setting with the overall methodology can inform future directions. So I'm going to vote no on this.
Thank you, Councillor Fry. Mayor Stewart to the amendment.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate Councillor Swanson's intent here, but I'm just thinking about my next discussion with the federal housing minister. And for example, the $1 billion that Toronto landed for their co-ops is both refurbishment and new development. So new units are high on the federal government's list. So I would hate to send a signal that that's not on our list. And I think removing this appendix would do that. So I will be voting against this, although I appreciate the intent by Councillor Swanson.
Thanks, Mayor Stewart. Councillor Kirby Young to this amendment.
Yeah, I heard loud and clear that the one thing that all of the co-ops, CHFBC, all of the co-ops and the members were asking for was resolution to the process, and with certainty and conclusion, and that council would definitively, in some way, dispose of and complete this order of business tonight, so that they could then move forward with their lease renewals, which have been outstanding and are causing people a lot of duress. And I think that this is a dangerous amendment that will essentially hold up the entire process, because you have a key principle that is one that has been discussed with all parties, that over years and months of work that CHFBC has agreed to, that the co-ops themselves have agreed to, and a number of them I know have indicated that they are actually looking forward to the opportunity to welcome new neighbors, and you're changing the rules of engagement at the last minute, and I can't support something that's not going to give people that certainty so they can actually get a decent amount of sleep because they know that they're going to get their lease renewed. That's really, at the end of the day, what we're trying to do here, is give people some of that certainty. And so for that reason, and as some of my colleagues have stated, I will not be supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kirby Young. Clerk, we don't have any other speakers on the list, so if you could move us to a vote on this amendment by Councillor Swanson. Okay, that vote fails with myself, Mayor Stewart, and Councillors Fry, Wiebe, Boyle, Dominato, Bligh, and Kirby Young in opposition. Okay, we are now back to the main queue again. And Councillor Swanson, do you have anything to add? Councillor Swanson?
I'd like to thank all the people from co-ops who came, and to note again that we don't get people coming from single family housing or rental properties or even social housing glowing about how great it is to live in those places. And I'm hoping that we can use some of the money from this to, well, hoping we can get more federal provincial money for co-ops, and maybe to use some of the money was in one of the amendments to put some more of our co-op money into co-ops. And it would be nice if we could get some sort of policy for more co-ops in the Broadway and the Vancouver plans. And living in a co-op, I know it's a really great way to live. And yeah, so just thanks to all the speakers who came, and please don't give up pushing for co-ops. I hope we can get a lot more of them and increase the amount of non-market housing across the city, and maybe that will help bring down the price of market housing, as well as be nice places for everyone to live. And thanks to the staff for all their work too.
Thanks, Councillor Swanson. Councillor Fry, to the amended motion.
Yeah, Chair, I sent in a second amendment, hoping to keep it.
I'm moving us to Amendment Q. I'll put you on.
Hoping to keep it pretty brief insofar as it's really, and I guess if it's pulled up on the screen, it's really taking this methodology that we're approving tonight and just allowing it to inform how the City of Vancouver can support the growth and viability of the co-op sector, and informing it as a part of our actual and aspirational housing continuum by including it in Housing Vancouver, the Vancouver Plan, and our healthy city strategies. Because what we heard from speakers, and even in some of the reporting and recommendations, was that we were contemplating how even revenues from co-op land leases and stuff could go into other housing forms and affordable and supportive housing. And I think that it's important to include kind of this work that's been done and this work that's been done with the co-op housing sector and the input from the community, and of course the work of staff, and help that inform our future aspirational goals and plans that we have working on.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not seeing anyone else on the queue here. Councillor Kirby, actually I do. Go ahead.
If we were to put the language of this amendment side by side with the one from Councillor Boyle that said support the development of more co-ops and how the city could support that, wouldn't there be a great deal of similarity between the two of these?
Councillor Kirby Young, I am actually just reading that motion or that amendment as you speak. So I too am. So
yeah, I was going to say, Chair, let alone getting into secondary questions about this already being part of the Vancouver Plan discovery. And
okay, so Councillor Kirby Young, are you calling a point of order on this?
Yes.
Which section?
8.7 C.
Okay. Yes, and I'm just going to, for council's sake, read out the motion, sorry, the amendment that was just passed by Councillor, that was tabled by Councillor Boyle. That staff report back to council with options for further investment or other support to the co-op housing sector that could deepen affordability for lower income co-op members and or enable the creation of new co-op housing units across the city, recognizing the importance of co-op housing in the city of Vancouver. I'm going to rule this amendment by Councillor Fry out of order because it is redundant to the amendment that we just passed earlier this evening. Okay, I'm back to main queue. Councillor Fry?
I don't believe that was redundant, but that's fine. It's been a long day. So I will just speak more generally to the substantial work that's gone into getting us here, and in appreciation of everybody on council who have, listened and understood and recognized the incredible amount of passion that folks have come and spoken to the importance of their communities, the incredible amount of work that our staff have done to get us to this point. The fact that this is work that has been hanging over this is an uncertainty that has been hanging over a lot of co-ops in our city for a great number of years. And this is a moment where we've actually come together to really, I think, make a meaningful commitment to those communities that has really, I think we heard the anxiety, and it's easy to sort of look at this as just a housing form or city land, and what is the valuation of that city land and what can we get on that city land, and really what we heard loud and clear is that these are homes. These aren't just housing units. These are homes. These are communities, and they're incredibly rich communities. And I do hope that despite this amendment that was just ruled out of order, that this is a methodology that will inform, how we incorporate co-ops into our future planning exercises. And I think that this is a really great signal, and I'm incredibly proud of the work that, especially this council, coming across party lines to really kind of come together on something of such a fundamental sort of value proposition for the city of Vancouver. I think it's really fantastic, and I'm grateful to be a part of it, and I'm really grateful for our staff and for the folks who are going to benefit in the communities that will flourish as a result of this decision tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Fry. And Councillor Dominato, to the amended motion.
Thanks, Chair. And just, I guess, a couple of reflections from the last few days. A thank you to our staff and to CHFBC for the authentic engagement around these negotiations. I know both our staff and the CHFBC acknowledged that that one of the wins here in all of this was that the working together and building and finding consensus, and that it has been a lot of hard work. It's very complex. And so just to acknowledge that, also to say thank you to all of the residents and speakers who called in to speak to this report. Again, very complex, not only complex for the public, but complex for council. And given all the questions I think staff fielded, I think they'll appreciate that. And certainly I heard people speak from the heart in terms of the many benefits of co-op housing, and I had a resident who wrote into me, and I didn't have an opportunity to share with council, who spoke about his personal experience and some of the learning he gained in terms of financial management experience of being in the community and being a steward of the co-op, but also benefiting from a manageable rent after he and his partner split up. He later in life has moved on. He's now a homeowner in North Vancouver, but he talked in very positive terms about his experience and the community component of that as well. And we heard many stories from individuals and families about the multitude of benefits of co-ops. And I think recognizing that as we're striving to enable a variety of housing, that co-ops are a part of that and on the housing spectrum. And I know personally, my mom, she passed away now, I think it was about 4 years ago this week, desperately wanted to get into co-op housing because they were stretched. They were living in market rentals, and I think too much pride to admit it, but that was one of the avenues they were exploring, her and her husband at the time. And there are, as it was acknowledged, are a number of wait lists. And so I am happy with where we've landed today, and with the discussions back and forth with council today and with staff and CHFBC, and addressing the pace of change, and so that there isn't a huge upswing for households, that it'll be more modest and paced. And I think that was really important to have that addressed through the amendments that were delivered today. So I do think to the amendments that were raised by Councillors Boyle and Councillor Fry, that yes, we certainly should be looking at how
this model is a success and how to replicate it in the city. And so just to acknowledge that it's not just about this framework, but of renewals, but looking to the future and what we can do to provide more choices and affordable housing for residents, both those who are here living today and those in the future. So
And that is it for your time.
thank you.
Right, thank you. Councillor Kirby Young.
Yeah, thank you. I think that this is a case when we have to do what I think fulfill our number one responsibility, and that's often listening. And I think in this situation, we were educated in the best sense of the word by the experts in the sector who are doing this every day, from CHFBC to the individual co-ops to the members that sit on all of their committees, and the individual members in terms of how these co-ops have contributed to their lives and how much they knit people together. There's a lot of conversation and discussion, and rightly so, in the legwork that's been done. And I appreciate it's really difficult file, and I appreciate the legwork by staff. And a lot of that isn't by necessity financial, in terms of trying to quantify and ensure that we as a council are balancing what is fair in terms of use of city resources, in this case land, and that we are also supporting the creation of affordable housing, but ultimately what you're creating is community through that. And I think that we really, I really appreciate everybody that came and shared their stories and their personal stories really generously. And we heard from everybody, from single moms and artists, and the woman who was widowed and said, you know, or divorced and left penniless, about how their lives would have been really, really different if they hadn't had the benefit and the opportunity of ending up in a co-op. And it caused me to kind of reflect and think about that. And one speaker said that they would imagine that people on council came from diverse backgrounds and roots and that might understand and appreciate that, but they didn't necessarily know. And so I sort of thought about one of my personal experiences is that my nana in the UK, which is where I was born, lived in council housing, and which is very similar, right? It's for non-market housing for people that simply can't afford to rent. And it was modest, a townhouse, and she lived in a modest small town in the UK, and she worked in a shoe factory to try to support her family and her 4 kids as a single parent. And I remember going to visit her, and you had to put coins and shillings into the fireplace to turn the heat on, and she would save them to see how many she could afford, to how many bars that she could put on to heat. Anyhow, she saved. I went to visit her once, and she saved those up so that we would have heat when I was there, when I was visiting her. Anyway, a lot of other really fun and interesting stories. She lost a thumb working in the shoe factory in the UK, and she would supplement her income, because she was quite a knitter, by having a knitting machine, and she would knit for all of the kids that lived in the council housing in the neighborhood around her. And that's how she was able to sort of afford some money, and then she was able to buy a plane ticket and come to visit us. So it really does make a huge difference to people in terms of their ability to have stable housing. I'm really sorry about that. Didn't mean to do that. But I think that having seen that and how precarious housing is, which is an experience that I also had when my mom became a single mom with 3 relatively young kids. And the biggest issue at the time was how you keep a roof over your family's heads. And so when people go through that, it's very significant. And families often don't have the ability to thrive when that happens. So I'm deeply grateful for the work of the co-ops. I'm glad that we're able to land on something and recognize that the other expenses that they have in, honestly, which is a very expensive city in Vancouver. So I really did appreciate the distinction that was made by CHFBC in terms of the median rental income relative to the median Vancouver income. And I am really hopeful that tonight, with all of the work that everybody put into this, and we just happen to be the people in the seats that get to actually sign off on it, that this is going to provide a great foundation in order to ensure tenure and security of housing for people moving forward, and that we'll be able to create additional co-ops in partnership with the co-ops that are there. So I applaud them for their work. I thank them for what they're doing, and I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kirby Young. Mayor Stewart, to the amended motion.
Yeah, thanks very much, Chair Carr. You know, I was having a conversation. I've been working on co-ops for a very long time, and one I was working on in Burnaby actually had a lease on non-city land, and the lease expired, and now that co-op is being offered to the market for highest and best use. So this is a really important thing that we're doing here. Co-ops are not growing; they're under threat, and I think that this is extremely exciting that we're able to, I hope, pass, which it sounds like it is, a historic framework to renew leases on 57 co-ops on city lands, and that's almost 4,000 homes. And these aren't 4,000 homes that people will move into. These are communities that are in place now that are the heart of our city. So I think this is a great thing we're doing, and it's something that has been going on for years and years and years. So I think this framework, what we've come up with here, what we've worked with co-ops to do, will lead to now leases being signed, not just the leases that are due, but the leases that are the future leases. So co-ops, I think, will come now and sign well before their due date, so we can, again, with leases signed with the city and everything secure, then of course we have all kinds of ability to go and not only get investments, mortgages, but also more funding from the federal and provincial governments. And they're keen to do this work, from what I'm told. So this is, I think, a really exciting, uplifting evening. It's all, it's hard to listen to because you're going through the weeds of financial here and there and details. However, I don't think council or anybody involved in this has lost sense of the larger picture, which is to provide homes, keep homes for communities in the city, but with the hope that we can have more and more people living in co-ops in this sector, perhaps bringing in a new golden age for co-ops, and Vancouver leading the way for the rest of the country. So thanks everybody for all your work on this. I know it's tough, and it's especially at the end of a very long July, halfway through a very, very long year. But I just wanted to thank everybody that's put really all their effort into this and come up with something that I think we can all be proud of. So thanks again, and looking forward to a positive vote on this.
Thanks, Mayor Stewart. And Councillor Bligh.
Thank you very much, Chair. I just wanted to state that I will be voting in support of where we've landed tonight. And I'm doing that with the intent of acknowledging that co-ops are an excellent form of housing, and they wouldn't exist without all those that participate in their co-op day to day. I think it's a form of housing that we should, as the mayor just said, continue to support, but not just support. Look to see how we can expand it as a type of housing, and enable more of that, more of the community, more of the connection, and the stability of the particular type of housing that co-op provides, and I believe that's what we heard. So I'm really happy to support and thank everybody, CHFBC, the co-op members that came to speak, but also those that wrote for our entire 3 years so far in this term. We've consistently received emails and letters, and our staff, of course, that have done a ton of work to get us to this point. So I'm very happy to support it. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Bligh. And that does take us to the end of the speakers list. So clerk, if you could move us to a vote on the amended motion.
A point of procedure, Chair, I just want to acknowledge that there is a portion of the motion that I had voted against, and I will be voting in favor of the entire motion to move us along.
Okay, so you're not going to be
not asking to sever, just acknowledging.
Right. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much for that. And that has passed unanimously. Thank you, council, and thank you, staff. Great. Up there long enough for a few people to take some pictures. Council, we are now moving on to referred items. We have two items. These were referred from the council meeting on July 6th. And just want to remind the speakers that you have 5 minutes to make comments. Should state whether you are in support or opposition of the recommendations. Council members, you have up to 3 minutes to ask questions of speakers. As you know, speakers are under no obligation to respond. We have those two items referred from the council meeting. The first is item 3, which was previously motion B1, keeping the public in the information loop, which was moved and introduced by Councillor Swanson and seconded by Councillor Hardwick. We will move straight to speakers on this. Clerk, if you could let me know if we only have one speaker for this item. Is Nathan Davidovich on the line?
Yes, Chair Carr.
Great, Nathan Davidovich, if you can hear me. Nathan Davidovich.
Perhaps he's just having trouble with unmuting, but he is on the line. If you could give us a moment.
Yes, I certainly can.
Speaker number 1, Nathan Davidovich, are you on the line, please?
Yes, I am.
Okay, there you go, Chair Carr.
Your magic voice there, Kirk. Nathan, go ahead. You have up to 5 minutes to address council.
Thank you very much, Chair Carr. I'm calling in support of the motion by Councillor Swanson because we need to get the city manager's memos that are relevant to many speakers that speak to the city council. The previous council, the vision councils, they had a rule of releasing them to the public only after 3 months, but that's bad also. It's not used by any other city council in BC, and actually the last post on the city website is from December of 2020, so it's over 6 months ago that you could see the city manager's memos. Vision has changed many procedures and rules in the city of Vancouver, and now the city of Vancouver is unique among all cities in BC in the way it handles the public business. For over 100 years, Vancouver had proper rules and procedures, and Vision threw them all out. Why not have emails to the city council instead of just filing out a special form on the city website that goes to 311? It does not reach city council for another 2 or 3 days. Why not post all the correspondence that city council receives instead of us filing an FOI request to see them? This is done in other cities. And the city council is not anymore a vision council, and we should make many changes, or you could make, this city council could make lots of changes prior to the October 2022 election. Thank you very much.
And thank you. That was very clear, and there are no questions for you. Very much appreciate you coming and your diligence in also following all of council meetings. So thank you, Nathan.
Thank you.
So council, that is the end of our speakers list on this item. So is there any discussion? It has, of course, been moved and seconded. Councillor Swanson, you are on for up to 3 minutes. Sorry, up to 5 minutes.
Yeah,
Oh, sorry, let me, Councillor Swanson, actually, I have a Councillor Swanson, Dominato, Fry. I haven't yet moved you to a main queue. Clerk, could you just make sure when I get to that main queue, I'll put Councillor Swanson on if she can start right off the bat. I think we're both doing it. I'm going to let you do it, Clerk, so that we're not deleting each other.
I think I was too.
Oh, all right. Councillor Swanson.
Yeah, so I was just hoping that if we pass this motion, we can get faster, the public can get faster access to memos that council receives, and so they'll have all the information that we have. I put one suggestion in here that they be posted with the Thursday media roundups, but there could be other things, like maybe they could be put on the agenda packages that go out every 2 weeks. But the motion says and or report back, so I don't think it's too prescriptive, and I'm just hoping that we can get something out of it so that we can get memos that we get with really good information. Like today, actually, we got a really good memo with all kinds of information about co-ops, but it was confidential. And then later, when the staff answered the question, they basically said a lot of stuff that was in that confidential memo. But it would have been nice to be able to send that to some of the co-op folks, because it answered some of the questions they had. And to wait 3 months to do that is too late. So yeah, I'm just hoping that this is a motion that can speed up the release of non-confidential, non-in-camera memos that we get in response to council motions. So thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Swanson. To the motion, Councillor Dominato.
Thanks, Chair. Through you to the city manager, I just have a question just around resourcing, recognizing this is a report back, and I think there is, I would say, largely an expectation on governments to do a better job around transparency and open disclosure. But I am curious about the city manager's perspective on what this looks like and translates into in terms of managing. Do we have the infrastructure in terms of technology to make this happen more swiftly, or is it a matter of hiring more staff to make that happen? Or would they bring back a report with a series of options and recommendations? I'm just trying to understand that, because in principle, I support the open transparency. It's just whether this is attainable right now to have something delivered like 2 days after we deliberate on decisions on the Thursday. I'm just curious.
Yes, thank you. I'll take that point of information. City Manager, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Chair Carr, and thanks for the questions. Certainly understand the intent here, and don't have any kind of disagreement at all with the notion of making this information available to the public and as quickly as possible. I would say that, yeah, right now we are behind in posting some memos. What happens right now is that those memos go through a review to make sure that before they're released, that we're not releasing any information that would be either in breach of the Freedom of Information Act or otherwise create any jeopardy for the city. So it does involve a fair amount of work by the staff, first of all, that produced the memo, as well as by law, to check those things. Now, again, I haven't at this point had a chance to come up with specific recommendations as to how we would address what council would be seeking if this resolution were to pass. Certainly the notion of memos that are provided in response to council motions, that's a specific subset of communication, obviously, that council gets. So if that's a focus, we would work more specifically on those as a kind of maybe a starting point for this. What it may mean is that those memos take a little bit longer to get to you in the first place, because right now what we do prioritize is getting information to council as quickly as possible. So there may be some trade-offs there that we will have to examine. But again, I certainly understand the fundamental intent here, and happy to do whatever we can to make this information transparent. We have, we do make a lot of information in terms of communication with council available to the public. A lot of the communication that you get ultimately is released. I'm not sure that that's necessarily standard practice across municipalities. That's not been my experience of looking at it, but so yeah, happy to take a look at this if that's council's wish.
Great. Thank you very much, City Manager. Councillor Dominato?
Thanks, Chair. And just in light of the City Manager's response, I'm sending an amendment right now to the resolution. Just to amend the time frame for Q4 2021, in light of the fact staff are already behind right now, and to remove reference to the Thursday media roundups, and just to have staff report back on possible process changes. So I'm circulating that now, and it's just been sent through to the clerks.
Okay, yes, yeah, you still have a minute and a half. Great, and the clerks have received it. So that's good.
And so I don't have much further to say other than I think that it just gives staff some flexibility to report back on options as opposed to a prescriptive requirement around the roundups, as well as a bit more time in light of the fact that we have a very busy month ahead of us and staff do want to take a break, I think, in August, as do councillors, and that gives them a little bit more time to come up with some different options.
Okay, so that is an amendment, so I'm going to move us to an amendment queue. I see no one on that queue. Oh, Councillor Boyle, go ahead.
Thanks. Just to briefly say, I also appreciate the spirit of this motion quite a bit, and I actually am comfortable supporting this amendment. I think council heard in feedback from staff that there were some concerns they needed to figure out in terms of the most appropriate way to be releasing this information and making sure that nothing that shouldn't be released isn't released, and that council is getting the information we need, and we are meeting these transparency goals that are clearly shared, I think, really among all of council and staff. So I think this is fair to not be too prescriptive, and to stick with the language that just asks for staff for their best advice on this in a timeline that's reasonable, but certainly makes an important move in this direction.
Thanks, Councillor Boyle. Councillor Fry to the amendment.
Yeah, also very appreciative of this amendment. I think it does give a bit more of a realistic framing to it, and certainly I was concerned that the or option for adding it to the Thursday roundup would be entirely unrealistic, and I appreciate adding the Q4 to give a little bit more time. I'm wondering, Chair, if I might ask a question of the city manager that I had just in a general sense now on this amendment to the amendment rather than.
You may state your point of information, and then I will.
Sure. So I'm curious if generally any non-confidential memos would be subject to FOI anyway, and anybody who wanted to find them would be able to. And a second question, if the notion that memos would otherwise be public would impact the delivery of information and perhaps make the staff authors a bit more circumspect or reserved in the information they may provide in a standard memo because they know it would be going public.
Yeah, so City Manager, if you would care to respond to those two requests for information.
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and thanks for the question. There are circumstances in which a memo that, I mean, certainly there's memos, as you know, Council, that are clearly contain confidential information. and they're marked as confidential, and you receive them kind of clearly delineated as that. In other cases, there are memos where the general topic isn't confidential, so there is no confidential kind of notation on the memo, but there may be certain content in that that would potentially be subject to redaction or withholding under the Freedom of Information Act. Again, often staff aren't writing the memo with that in mind, and it's only when we review it after the fact where law, for example, or the department may say, actually, there is something in there that we should withhold. So even if there was a subsequent FOI request, the memo may not be released in its entirety. It may be released with redaction. So I think that's one of the trade-offs that we'll need to manage. I do want to make sure that as staff, we're able to get information to you in a timely way, and we're not holding these memos up through kind of a very rigorous review process before you get them. So that's the balance that we'll have to strike here. Again, I expect there are some things that we can do, at least with some of these memos, to provide them maybe public access faster. And as I acknowledge, right now we're behind in making some of these memos available, just because in some cases they were actually sitting with me to approve their disclosure. So I'll own that one. We've just, I think, signed off on January and February, so those should be up on our web soon if they're not there now. So yeah, I think there are some trade-offs here, and I think you've raised some really good considerations that we're going to have to work through. But we're certainly happy to do that and come back and make some recommendations on if there are changes, what those might look like.
Thanks, City Manager. That's incredibly helpful. And thanks for indulging me there, Chair. I'm happy to support this amended motion. I do think that that we've given staff enough parameters on a report back that they can manage this, and hopefully it won't be too much of a burden. But I do think, as Councillor Swanson alluded at the top, that there's some really excellent information in some of these memos, and would greatly benefit the public and just delivery of information in general. And I think really highlight the excellent work of our staff, because some of these memos are so thorough and knowledgeable, and I think would actually really shine an incredibly positive light on the work that City of Vancouver employees do every day. So I will support this and hope that we can.
Oops, Councillor Fry, you are frozen on the screen. Okay, so I am going to have Clerk, you'll have to contact Councillor Fry, because that was the last speaker on this amendment queue, and I was going to have a move to a vote, but computer died.
I will check to see if we can get Councillor Fry back on so he's able to vote. Just one moment, please.
Thank you. Clerk, I do have a message from Councillor Fry that he is going to try and phone in. He's in favor of the amendment, but I'm not sure if it's acceptable if he can just phone in. Well, if he can phone in.
Yes, thank you, Chair Carr. It appears he's having connection issues, which might be from his own connection. And there's nothing we can really do about that. So if he phones in.
Otherwise, you cannot accept my
Hey,
conveying.
Clerk.
We got
Clerk,
him.
Chair, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
I'm phoning in.
Okay, we're going to move to a vote then, Clerk. And before we lose Councillor Fry, would you like to state for the clerk how you would like the vote assist?
Vote of assist in favor, please.
This is to the amendment. Thank you. Clerk, I'm going to let you, I'm going to let you manage that vote of cis because I think we're both trying to do that. Go ahead. And that is unanimous on that amendment. Thank you, clerks, and thank you, council. Back to the main queue. Councillor Dominato, do you have anything more to add to this?
Nothing further, Chair. I did want to just note, because I think it was noted by Councillor DeGenova that she had recused or was going to be marked absent for the last item, but that she intended to come back for this. I don't know if she's back. I just wanted to flag that she had intended to come back for the last few items on our agenda.
Right, clerk, we are at this point, I think, at the point of voting.
I'm not saying for this particular, sorry, just to be clear, is I think she had generally intended to come back, and I'm not sure if there was an arrangement of the clerks contacting her at the end of the co-op item. So I'm just flagging it. So
Chair Carr, it is the clerk here, and yes, Councillor DeGenova is back, and she did vote on that amendment.
Good. I just wanted to make sure that that was addressed. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Dominato. Councillor Fry, to the amendment.
In favor, please.
Oh, we're not at the vote yet, but okay, that's a good succinct statement. Thank you. I believe we can go to a vote now, clerk, on the amended motion. Councillor Fry, do you need a vote assist?
Oh, I got it now.
Oh, great.
I think so.
Councillors DeGenova, Swanson, and Kirby Young have not yet voted. No, Councillor DeGenova has. Councillor
Hi there. I think I voted. Did my vote come
through? It did come through. Thank you, Councillor DeGenova. So that has passed a unanimous, well, passed with no one in opposition. Right. So that concludes that item, and we are we are now on to the final second referred item, and that is item 4, which was previously motion B3, toward reconciliation, renaming Trutch Street, which was moved and introduced by Mayor Stewart, seconded by Councillor DeGenova. We will now hear our only speaker to this item, who is Kimberly Sicoli. Kimberly Sicoli, are you on the line?
Hi there, I am. Thanks for having me. I'm just going to quickly pull up my notes. Excuse me.
Good. Well, we can hear you
Hi there.
clearly.
Oh,
go ahead.
Perfect. Okay, thank you. Thank you. My name is Kim Sicoli, and I'm a volunteer and representative of Women Transforming Cities. And we support this motion to rename Trutch Street as a part of the city's ongoing commitment to work towards truth and reconciliation with Indigenous peoples of this land. Joseph Trutch is known for his anti-Indigenous racism and his work to dispossess Indigenous peoples of their land. We recommend that the city and neighboring municipalities rename Trutch and other streets at the recommendation of First Nations groups. A name change that follows Musqueam Indian bands traditions will also benefit the wider community in many ways. Names matter, and who we name our streets and spaces after can have significant ripple effects now and for future generations. They represent our values as a society and are an integral component, when done properly, toward reconciliation with the leadership of First Nations communities. This is not the only street or public space in Vancouver named after someone who promoted colonial, racist, and sexist harm, but we hope this will be precedent-setting for other harmful colonial legacies. And we see the renaming of this street to be a positive step forward, and thank you all for your time.
Oh, great. Thank you. And if you would remain on the line, I think that there are questions for you. I'm not sure if it's a holdover from another list, but if you could just be patient for 1 second. Councillor Swanson, are you on the list to ask questions? Councillor Swanson? You may
That's
be
a
muted.
holdover. That's a holdover.
All right, Councillor Fry, are you on the queue to ask questions?
No, it's a holdover.
Okay. Mayor Stewart, are you on the list to ask
Yeah.
questions?
Yeah, thank you so much, Speaker, for calling in this evening and supporting this. I think first step in a new journey or continuing our journey towards reconciliation. I was wondering what you thought. The way we name and rename things here in the city is council asks for advice from a civic naming body, advisory committee. This motion really passes that ability over to Musqueam Council on their request, and then from them to bring a name back to council. That's the thought of this. So it's not only changing the name in the street, it's actually really returning the naming ability to Musqueam Council. Do you think that is also an additional good step to take?
Hi, thank you for that question. Yes, absolutely. That would be an integral part of the support for this motion.
Okay, thanks so much. And that's all my questions, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mayor. And that is it for your questions as well. Thank you so much for coming to speak. Really appreciate the fact that you've tracked this through a number of very long meetings. And have a very good evening.
Thank you.
Great. And so, Council, we are now at the point of decision, debate and decision. I'll take us to the main queue. And Mayor Stewart, you're up first. Go ahead, up to 5.
Thanks so much. Councillor Carr, in answer to your question the other day when I introduced this motion, I think I was unclear in terms of how I saw this meshing with our current practices with the advisory committee. So I have been doing a bit more work. Under section 320 of the charter, it says that council may make bylaws for assigning names to street and changing the names so assigned when deemed necessary. So we do have, of course, this ability to do this within the charter. However, the process we do have, as you rightly pointed out, is through the advisory committee, who gives us suggestions as to what we want to name a street or civic asset. However, the policy on this area is that in unique circumstances, the city can use a name that's not that is not on the list or does not flow through the advisory committee. However, just to make sure we're clear on this and to establish best practice, which I hope this will do, I've asked. This is really a referral back to staff to come up with the best process that we can use. So again, I wasn't clear in my answer to you, and I just wanted to highlight that here. Councillor Kirby Young also asked if I would talk to the other nations, Tsleil-Waututh and Squamish. I ran out of time on that answer. I have already had fairly in-depth conversations with both Tsleil-Waututh Chief Leah George and Casalan from Squamish. Did inform them of my intent here. Did not bring the motion forward until I had spoken with them. It is, how do we negotiate with three nations that all have the sovereign claim on this land? Well, I guess we just talk, and the indication was they were fine with this, and in fact, would continue to dialogue on it. So I think we're okay to move ahead with this, and part of the motion is that I would continue that discussion, and council would empower me to continue those discussions. So I hope that I've done this correctly. Again, I would call your attention to the very good article that I pointed out in BC Studies that just outlines just how egregious Joseph Crutch has been. And I think, again, we shouldn't, again, it's not about removing people from history. It's about choosing who we celebrate. And this would be a good change, I think. So hope that the council will support this motion.
Great, thanks, Mayor Stewart. Councillor Swanson to the motion, up to 5.
Yeah, I just want to say I think this is a great motion. I love the idea of the Musqueam doing the naming themselves, and I hope we can do a lot more of them. That's it.
Thanks, Councillor Swanson. Councillor DeGenova to the motion. You may be muted, Councillor DeGenova.
Can you hear me now, Chair?
Yes, we can hear you now. Go ahead.
Okay, star six works this time. Thanks. I'm happy to support this motion. I did have a quick point of information, if I may, for the mover of the motion.
Yes, go ahead.
Thanks. And it's just to follow up actually on a point that was brought up yesterday by another councillor regarding the Civic Asset Naming Committee. And I also am a council liaison to that committee. And I was just wondering, Mayor, if you had at all spoken with the chairs or any members of that committee, because their job is to name civic streets, and we've been through this many times with them. And just as they're moving forward, I've always been able to see that they do really thoughtful consideration and try and consult, but not suggesting they get involved, but considering they are volunteers and, you know, they are an advisory committee, wonder sort of what consultation you'd had with them or plan to have with them in the future on matters like this as we move forward.
Yeah, thank you very much, Councillor DeGenova. And again, 2 minutes is never quite enough to introduce a member's motion. And so I didn't in any way want to undermine the fantastic work done by the Civic Asset Naming Advisory Committee, and that could definitely be part of the consultation. Is to talk with them, to go and visit and see what they think about this. Again, the part of the motion is to recognize the sovereignty of host nations and try to lift that up a bit through the empowering of the Musqueam Council to do this. And again, I did ask. This isn't something I'm kind of just dreaming up. I have been talking with them. Wade Grant, who's the CFO for Musqueam, was going to speak, but missed the deadline. Sorry to.
She sent a letter, I believe.
Oh yes,
so I think we've all received the letter.
Okay,
I just wanted to know, sort of in moving forward to some of the other councillors' questions. Sorry, maybe I wasn't clear. I wasn't suggesting that you had meant to exclude anyone or not appreciate them. I was just wondering, as other questions have come up from other council members, if they, we would consider more of these moving forward, which I'd like to see if the other nations have issues or Musqueam finds another street, that, the Civic Asset Naming Committee, maybe it was more a question as to whether or not you thought there was sort of a need to have some formal communication with them to make sure that they consider in moving forward, not just naming streets, but renaming streets and hearing from the host nations to ask them what they feel is the best instead of just presenting them with options. So it's just above and beyond this motion.
Sure. So in this motion, there is, I did say to the leaders of the Tsleil-Waututh and Squamish that if they would like me to bring a similar motion, I would do that for council. Those are one-offs though, and I believe you're all right that this process should be identified. I know that there was some adjustment to the policy, I think late in 2018, but I think this actually getting something renamed would show us how this works from tip to tail, and how we could perhaps make this work a little more smoothly. But again, the key is to recognizing the sovereignty of the three host nations. So, yeah, but I'm happy to have any discussions I need to have with anybody to make this work.
Thanks. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. It's a bit hard when I'm not completely on WebEx, but I wanted to say that I fully support the motion, was happy to second it yesterday, and appreciate, that it's a long time to hear from speakers sometimes, but do appreciate the letters that we did receive and the speaker who spoke, and I do support this motion. Appreciate the research that the mayor's office has done on this, and happy to move forward. I mean, I know for some things our staff want more research and consultation time, but sometimes when we don't need that, when there are facts, as there are here, we can just move forward with that. So happy to support this. And thank the mayor for his work on it.
Thank you, Councillor DeGenova. Councillor Fry, to the motion.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I was going to say I'm happy to support this, but I don't know that I'm happy to support this. I certainly do support it wholeheartedly, and I really am grateful to the mayor for bringing this forward. I say I'm not happy to support because I honestly, and I appreciate the mayor's giving the Musqueam space to work on this, and of course the Squamish as well. And I honestly can't imagine how it would feel to see that name and recognize the legacy and the history of it for people who live here and have lived here for time immemorial, and just that must be such an embittering feeling and hurtful and so many things. So I'm glad to see an assertive move by the mayor and hopefully with the support of this council to reconcile that. I suppose if I had one not lament, but one sort of thought around this is that I hope that there's an opportunity to also articulate why this name has changed and who Joseph Crutch was, and why we are sort of erasing his name from this place in Vancouver history, because I think it's important to learn from history. And while I've learned a lot through this process and through the mayor's motion and bringing this forward by doing my own research and leading off the mayor's research, I worry that future generations may not have the benefit of that understanding. And I think that we all need to sort of learn from our past to inform our future. And I think that it would be an important articulation, not necessarily a commemoration of the man, but an articulation of why we changed that name and why we're moving forward. So otherwise, 100% super supportive of this. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Fry. Councillor Bligh.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, so I'm speaking in support of this motion as well, and appreciate the opportunity to do my own research as well on the heels of this motion with this particular street name of Trutch, Joseph Trutch. And in conjunction with a conversation I had with one of the past chairs of the Civic Asset Naming Committee, we agreed that although adding more information to history so that people better understand what events occurred and what certain names across the city mean, we also agreed that there are just some names that shouldn't continue to be in the public sphere, and that this might actually be one of them. And so I'm casting my vote in favor today because I am voting to support taking this particular name and changing that name. I also spoke to Wade Grant, who said that it's a reminder of one of the legacies of Joseph Trutch, which was to ensure that the Musqueam received as little land as possible in their settlement with the federal government at that time, and that was sort of a legacy that he was quite proud of. So driving by that every day, Wade pointed out, that is a constant reminder, and sort of part of what we're dealing with in terms of reconciliation is finding ways that we can continue to work together and truly reconcile, and having to drive by a name that sort of reminds one of the injustice many years ago makes that quite difficult. So in these conversations, both with the past chair of Civic Naming Asset Naming Committee and Wade Grant, I feel quite confident that this is the right choice if this was to pass, to rename Trutch Street, and consider others as they come up, and we follow this process through as a council. And they in this way, where we're engaging and we're having conversation and we're learning about history, and we're really looking at this as opposed to sort of a blanket everything needs to change, really looking at the nuance of each historical story and name that goes with that, and making a decision as to whether or not that ought to continue in the public sphere. And so, like I said, I support this one no longer being in the public sphere. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Bligh. And Councillor Weep.
I'll also be supportive. I think one of the important things we need to do is recognize our dark history here in Vancouver, and a great example of that was the Harry Stevens building, which I met people that worked in it, and we had a conversation about the Komagata Maru, and his role in how that went down. And as we did a beautiful mural with Musqueam artists and South Asian artists to tell that story, we actually contacted the granddaughter of Harry Stevens and brought her down to be involved. And I think part of this truth telling and talk about reconciliation will be, how do we tell the story and how do we make sure that people really understand what has happened, what is our dark history, and how we can better move forward together. So I look forward to hearing what names come forward, how we continue to showcase the languages of the Halkminum and Squamish people here on the City of Vancouver. And I think this is just the start of a beautiful process. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Councillor Weeb. And that is it for Councillors' comments. So, Clerk, if you could take us to the vote, please. And that does pass unanimously. Great. So, Council, the standing committee portion of this meeting is now complete. And thank you all for your patience, diligence, and participation, vibrant participation. We will now convene in Council with Mayor Stewart as chair to deal with the recommendations and actions from today's committee meeting.
Thanks very much, Council. We're going to reconvene in Council to deal with the recommendations and actions from the Standing Committee. Deputy City Clerk, can we have the roll call, please?
Yes, Mayor Stewart in the chair. Councillor Carr.
Here.
Councillor DiGenova.
Present.
Councillor Fry.
Present.
Councillor Swanson. Councillor Swanson.
Here.
Thank you. Councillor Hardwick.
Present.
Councillor Weeb.
Present.
Councillor Boyle.
Present.
Councillor Dominato.
Present.
Councillor Bligh.
Present.
Councillor Kirby Young.
Present.
The meeting has quorum, Mayor Stewart.
Thanks very much, Clerk. We need a motion to adopt the Standing Committee's recommendations for items 1 to 4.
So moved. Councillor DiGenova.
I think I heard Councillor Blythe's name there. Seconder, please.
Second, Councillor Carr.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. All in favor say yay.
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 Opposed, nay. Thanks very much. That carries unanimously. Motion to adjourn, please.
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Councillor Hardwick. Who's that? Councillor Kirby Young is the seconder.
Yeah.
All in favor, yay.
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 Opposed, nay. Great. We're adjourned. Thank you very much. Anything else, clerks? Or are we good?
Just a big thank you to Adriane for chairing this week.
Yeah, that was a brutal one.
It's
Very
good,
well.
Mayor Stewart.
And thanks, staff, for all your hard work.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody. Okay.
Thanks, everybody.
Council.
Thank you, Council. Thank you, staff.
Everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.